Welcome into the Show 6 podcast, where we break down the championship series for Pokemon GO. Today, we're taking a look at the Milwaukee and Belo Horizonte regional championships, where 129 and 72 trainers competed, respectively. Milwaukee was truly a cosmic event, as North America's most famous trainers burned up in the loser side bracket, and multiple NA trainers fielded career best performances. Despite a chaotic burst of notable plays, a Bastiodon-shaped meteorite landed perfectly atop the podium to claim the gold. Meanwhile, in Belo Horizonte, the GB Lindos showed up in force, and dark types like Galarian Moltres and Guzzlord were nearly ubiquitous in the top cut. In an incredible tour de force, Zarddy returns to form by toppling LNDS Harjef in the grand finals. This and so much more. So if you're ready, let's lock in, and good luck, have fun. Welcome in, everybody. It's been about 3 weeks. Feels like a little while, but we are back in the saddle again, the Show 6 podcast, with a review of the Milwaukee and Belo Horizonte regional championships. I have my trusted co-host here, Aziz Wireless, ready to rock and roll. How are you feeling, my friend?
Yes. I'm feeling fabulous. I've just had a couple of days off. I used them for a journey to the United States of America. This time not for a regional event, but because I was a guest at a wedding of fellow Pokemon Go players. Traded to groom a high-rank Aegislash with my last Stonehenge. So feeling accomplished and slowly settling back into life in Europe.
It's so kind of you to give away such an incredible Pokemon. I built my own Aegislash for Fantasy Cup. Tried to play it. Do not play it as well as someone like Elo DeColo plays it, but it was definitely fun to try. And also, when you say journey to the US, I don't know, just as a American myself, I think of like the Oregon Trail. And the thing I wanted to say was, I hope you didn't get dysentery from traveling across the US, because that's just like what the settlers used to do in their wagons, right? It's a famous old game for all the boomers listening out there, like myself. But that's great to hear. I'm glad you had some time off. We are kind of like closer to the Lille side of things than we are to the Milwaukee and Belo Horizonte side. But I think that also lends us a really good perspective, because we've had some additional time to kind of digest the meta, what's going on, and also look at some practice tournaments, meta trends, even a very, very special tournament out in Japan that has a rising star that I would love to talk about. So ZZ, I think the top headline as we look back at Milwaukee is the terror of Bastiodon continues.
Yeah, I'm really wondering whether this is going to stay a North America thing, or whether the disease that is Bastiodon is going to spread further. Because, like you know how like sometimes it's like an invasive species almost. Like it came from LATAM originally. It was brought into the US, and now it just like keeps on taking titles. It's like a lanternfly type of deal, but. Yeah, Basti does it again. Also, honestly, carried a lot of the grand finals, even though the real star of the show was not the infamous wall face, but instead a creature that is supposed to be Spice. It's not supposed to be a regional champion. FEAROW, what do you have to say for yourself?
Hey, the Peck buff is definitely OP. And I will say, to honor our Aussie listeners like PvP Steve, I do think the first instance of Bastiodon winning a championship was Australia. So maybe it came from Australia to LATAM to North America. And I got to be honest, it looks like EU is next for this plague.
And we know that PvP Steve is a traveler. He does fly around constantly. So maybe he just like let a couple of Shieldon loose in the Brazilian grasslands, and then they just spread from there. I want to put the blame on somebody, and I think PvP Steve is a great candidate.
Yes, I agree. We can all collectively, everyone listening, can blame Steve for the dominance of Bastiodon. So thanks, Steve. We really appreciate it. Very, very fun times. But I agree with you. I think that the story of the grand finals and the winning team was definitely the FEAROW and Bastiodon core. But there were also some other meta trends that we could talk about. I think that Peck Murkrow coming from Latin America, which we did see at a previous regional. Now showing up in force in Milwaukee was really cool. We had trainers like Pranav playing it, Dapper Disc, Teddy Bear, and I think those were the only three Murkrow players in top cut, but still very, very cool. Fortress seems to be returning in terms of usage. Pranav, Elam, and Out of Pocket, three of NA's best players were playing that. You also had Jay Mills running that Pokemon as well. Shadow Dusknoir, which I know we're definitely going to talk about. You and I were discussing before we pressed record. This is a very interesting Pokemon that needs to be dissected further. Then you had other things like Cradily is almost ubiquitous everywhere. Mudslap is pretty much everywhere. Was there anything in terms of the Milwaukee top cut that stood out to you?
I think it's very surprising to me personally to see a Shadow Dragonair take a medal. It's not surprising that it is Rise to Occasion taking that medal because Milwaukee is just his hometown regional, and he has been just always strong when it comes to performing on home soil.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I will say an interesting story to me was how Pocket's team specifically, I don't know whether it got leaked or whether it just got found out because it won so many practice tournaments going into the event. So we had multiple people playing that, but nobody going as far as the original creator of the line.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, even though Pocket obviously came into the event as the defending champion, I think a top eight is also nothing to scoff at, especially going into day two from the loser side, as so many very accomplished, very decorated NA trainers did.
Well, as I hinted in the intro, Zarddy did win the Belo Horizonte Regional Championships the same weekend. And I think it's so poetic and so funny because if you look back at 2023 in Natal, when Zarddy won the regional there, he was playing a team that was Trevenant, Registeel, Obstagoon, Alola Ninetales, Lantern, and Shadow Dragonair. And you see Rise playing it the same weekend. Coincidence? I think not. I think something was in the stars this weekend.
Yeah,
Turning the page to
some
Pocket,
meteorites, exactly.
yes, some shooting stars, maybe some constellations were aligned. Turning to Pocket, okay, I'm just gonna say it flat out. I have never seen a Pokemon let Pocket down so many times like that Shadow Talonflame did. Talonflame looked terrible. It looked so bad, and it couldn't get the farm downs it needed. It was too slow to outpace the opponent. It didn't do the damage that Pocket wanted, and I felt like almost every single time he brought that Pokemon, he was either in a nail-biting Pocket classic situation where he barely gets the win, or it was just flopping on its face. I could not stand watching him play Talonflame. I don't know if you got the same vibe.
I definitely did get the same vibe, and I also want to say that I think it's kind of good that Talonflame looks bad currently, just because it won the very first event of the season in the hands of Martine and Eloquence in Frankfurt. Um, and after that event, I talked with some European battlers who said, "Oh, you need to be super strong into Talonflame. Shadow Talonflame is the strongest Pokemon in the meta." And at that point in time, a lot of people were also like Shadow Charizard truthers, so they thought that thing
Uh,
was going to be top meta. And now
uh,
we've just moved along. We've had a meta development. That means the meta isn't solved, the meta isn't static. Instead, we have Pokemon like Blastoise, Pokemon like Bastiodon taking championships, with Talonflame taking a little bit of a backseat. So it's not
mhm.
its time currently, but I think once maybe more answers to those Blastoises and Bastiodons emerge, it will be brought back at a later time in the season. It's just like reading the meta of the moment, and Talonflame already had its moment in the sun, but again, like it's time for different stars to rise at this point in time.
It's a very funny position to be in because you want fire coverage, right? You see a lot of targets, a lot of steel, maybe the occasional. Never mind. I'm not even going to say it. The only grass type you see is Cradily. Maybe you see a couple bugs like Charge Bug, but basically you want fire type coverage for the bug steals like Scizor and Fortress, or for the Tinkatons, or for whatever it might be, and you want to be not hopeless against Mudslap. So you say, oh, well, I'll use a flying subtyping and I'll play some Talonflame. But I agree with you. I feel like the moment in the sun kind of was in the past and it might circle back again. A lot of these things do tend to kind of cycle back and become relevant, but I don't think that this was the tournament to bring the Talonflame. A rare meta read by Pocket that didn't seem to really work out in his favor. But I like the rest of his team. I think the Lapras is a bit curious, probably a little more relevant now that there aren't as many dark types. But man, the Lapras versus any dark type matchup, whether it's Galarian Moltres, Murkrow, whatever it might be, is so abysmal with those side waves being double resisted. It just feels like it falls flat. But either way, either way, it's fine. Um, yeah, I agree with you. I think that there were a few interesting meta trends. Like we talked about, Mud Slap seems to be almost ubiquitous. Steel types, we see Teddy Bear running Tinkaton, which I thought was a solid pick. That seems like, again, when things kind of move into the spotlight and then move out, we had a Galarian Moltres moment. I think Tinkaton on Teddy Bear's team would have been phenomenal in Belo Horizonte. It would have been so sick. And we're going to talk more about Tinkaton and Zardy's team. But one steal that I'm still not a believer in, ZZ. I don't care what people say. I don't care how many times Caleb picks it on his caster predictions. I do not believe Empoleon is the sauce. I just don't.
I will say that I did really enjoy the plays that the Empoleon players made, namely Delusion, who isn't
Mm-hmm.
actually entirely new to the scene. There was just a name change to make it a little more TPCI appropriate, as well as Dapper Discs, who came in
Mm-hmm.
fifth place and I think equaled his best ever regional performance. And those players made Empoleon look viable, but I still feel as if it needs a lot of maintenance to be made work, and it's not something that easily finds utility, finds its targets, and I don't know, maybe it's because it doesn't really take a hit as well. Maybe it's because it's so hopeless against most mudslappers. And I think like during the broadcast, I remember like a moment where maybe it was Caleb. Caleb may be Empoleon's strongest soldier, where he was like, "Oh, you resist all the charge attacks that Gastrodon runs, so the matchup isn't that great." I think you just get one shield slap down. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think you don't really want to be an Empoleon in the current meta. But yeah, it's not totally ridiculous to bring it. Like you do have
Yeah.
a pretty nice matchup against stuff like Credilly, which is on every team. If you manage to get a farm down somewhere, the energy essentially goes everywhere. But it just feels so defensively vulnerable at times.
Mm-hmm.
And even though like steel typing typically a blessing, but not really if you have like a pretty meager stat product plus just so much ground type damage going around.
It's such an interesting position as well for that Pokemon because if you look at when you think about Empoleon, you think about very, very favorable matchups. I would say the Cradilly matchup or any matchup against, say, a Wigglytuff, those are probably some of your best possible situations that you can be in. Metal Sound does so much damage to a Cradilly. You can farm down Wigglytuff, etc. But I feel like because of Empoleon's frailty and its numerous weaknesses, whether it's to fighting or to ground or to electric, whatever, um, you don't really have those same farm down opportunities that you did in the 50-second or 60-second switch timer. So you can't really like build up a metal sound lead and then make the Gastron matchup competitive, if you get what I'm saying. But it's such a funny thing because when you look at a Pokemon like Bastiodon, you can make the same argument, say, oh, well, you can't really farm stuff down because of the switch timer, but they're two steel types that operate so differently. Bastiodon relies on that bulk and the fast attack smackdown damage. It doesn't use charge attacks. It's very, very fast attack oriented. So it's so funny how two
It
steel
doesn't
types.
use charge attacks, especially appropriate when we look at the grand finals, but that will come later.
Exactly. Yes. Sometimes it misfires charge attacks too, but you never know with Bastiodon. But yeah, it's just so funny how you can have two steel type Pokemon that maybe fill kind of similar roles, but they have such different play styles when you pick each of them up. And I think that's such a nuanced thing in the championship series that's not talked about enough. One thing I did want to mention, we don't see it very much here in the Milwaukee top cut. I think we see them occasionally in Belo Horizonte. I believe there's one, two, three, four, five in Top Cut in Belo Horizonte. We only see four of them here in Milwaukee. That is Shadow Dust Noir. And if everyone who's a longtime listener recalls back to our Worlds recap or even our Worlds pre-show, I was not a believer in Shadow Dusknoir. I think I called out Lyle Jeffs when he was running it at Worlds. I was like, I don't know how this thing succeeded because it seems like such a liability. But Shadow Dusknoir in this current meta is actually sneaky good. And I really do like a lot of the positional play you can gather with it. You and I were talking about this as well. But my main takeaway is that Shadow Dusknoir seems to be a powerful answer to this double rock duo of Cradily and Bastiodon, because we saw Steiner play that, we saw MeteorFallian play that. I think that dynamic punch coverage plus Astonish for that hard hitting fast attack damage, it puts Dusknoir in such an interesting place in the meta, and the absence of dark types helps it so much. We don't see that many Galarian Moltres here in Milwaukee. We don't see any Drapion. Obviously, no Umbreon. That's from like 2 years ago. But what I'm saying is that there's a clear path for this Pokemon to succeed. I don't know if you agree or disagree or what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I think like we've seen a lot proof of concept for Galarian Corsola, right? Like that is
Mm.
essentially agreed upon to be the second best Pokemon in the meta, just behind Cradily. And if you look at Dusknoir, it's the same mono ghost typing. So in terms of that, it is positioned fairly similarly. And now, when team building, you just need to select whether you need another neutral damage sponge, something that you can just throw in a matchup, absorb a lot of energy, and just play like a little bit more defensively, or whether you want to go on the offense. And if you can afford to go on the offense with how the rest of your team is constructed, I think Shadow Dusknoir is a very powerful, very viable strategy right now. Not only because the ghost and fighting type coverage that it sports is only resisted by Hisuian Zorua and Zoroark, both of which are not PvP relevant whatsoever. Um, and also because, thanks to Shadow Punch, the pacing on it is even better than on Galarian Corsola. So that's a 35 energy move. You generate 10 energy per Astonish, so it's 4-3 pacing.
Mhm.
Essentially, it's like 12 turns, then 9 turns, and that allows you to keep pace with Pokemon like the Kanto Marowak, which won the event in the hands of MeteorFallian. You will also be able to more effectively fight back against. Like, I think personally, I'm okay with the neutral matchup that Corsola has against Cradily, but as somebody who had a Galarian Corsola against a Bastiodon in the grand finals of Pittsburgh, I would have loved some fighting coverage there because unless you have a really, really high rank Corsola, that matchup is brutal for you.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a Shadow Dusknoir, you just, I don't know, you probably don't one shot it, but you're probably able to farm down with Astonishes. So that gets a lot better. But there's two things that you need to be really aware of when building around Shadow Dusknoir. And the one thing is that you need to have enough neutral options that surround it, like
Yes.
Pokemon such as Cradily, maybe a Corviknight, Pokemon with a stat product of 2000 and above that are able to take a lot of hits from most of the common meta options. Plus, another thing that you want to make sure of is to have at least 89 HP on your Shadow Dusknoir, because there is this special fact about the Dusknoir versus Corsola matchup that I think Homeslice Henry pointed out on the Milwaukee broadcast, where every Astonish from Galarian Corsola does 11 HP worth of damage to your Dusknoir. Um, like you can reach a breakpoint, but that's very difficult. Boat point, but that's very difficult. Um, so if you have 89 HP or more, you will be able to survive 8 Astonishes. And that allows you to get to 2 Shadow Punches, even if they go straight for the fast attack down. And that allows you to win the one shield scenario. And even if they play the 2 shields, you'll just be up a shield because before they even get to 2 moves, you'll be farmed down. So you'll have a low health Corsola on the other side that maybe comes out with a move, but you also will have a shield advantage. So that's not even that bad. Yeah, that's essentially all I have to say about Shadow Dusknoir. It is now a play Pokemon champion. It did get that in Belo Horizonte, but it
Mhm.
was a fairly strong choice even in Milwaukee, in my opinion.
So as you were mentioning that about the HP on Shadow Dust Noir, I opened my account and looked at mine. I've got a rank 153, and it's got, I don't know if you can see it, it's got 90 HP points, ZZ.
Okay, let's
90.
go. Let's go.
We are
Not
in
only
business. Let's
not
go.
only does this survive the Astonishes, but also if you like come out with a move, and then your opponent has a Pokemon that would win CMP over you, you will not get the shield KO. Like, you will survive even that 1 HP that the shield would take. So honestly, this is the ideal Dusknoir.
We are
Congratulations.
cooking. We are cooking. I'm gonna do the. If you're watching the YouTube version, you can see me doing the fly hand rub. Is what we're doing right here. Okay. So I don't know, ZZ. We don't do the show for a few weeks, and then we come on, and it feels like we never skipped a beat. And I had the biggest smile when you talked about stat product, because I feel like that's something that not I don't think any creators are really talking about this in depth, especially when it comes to show 16 building. But the two teams that I see with Shadow Dust Noir that seemed the best equipped for deep runs were Out of Pockets and J Mills. And the reason is that they actually share three of the same Pokemon, being Lapras, Fortress, and the Clodsire. Lapras with 2169 stat product on average, the Fortress with 2050 on average, and then the Clodsire with 2400 stat product. Then you look at Pockets Guzzlord, 1983, right around that 2000 mark, and that's just a stock IV. If he has a good one, he could push up towards 2000. Cradilly, 2126 average stat product, like Jay Mills has on his team. So I think that's something that's not talked about enough. And if you look at a lot of these successful regional teams, I did this briefly with some of the teams from last season. You have about an average of 2000 to 2400 stat product across the team. And then you commonly have one outlier, whether it's Primate, whether it's Scizor, whether it's FEAROW. You have that one kind of wild card that breaks shields and is just a wedge in terms of straddling matchups and breaking the meta. But on average, you want to look for those bulkier Pokemon. So, as a general rule of thumb, everybody, if you are playing an event and you don't think a Pokemon's very good, for example, Dondozo doesn't look very good, look at its stat product. When you realize that a high ranked Dondozo has over 2100 stat product, that's a Pokemon you need to stash because it is one moveset update away from being meta relevant. So, again, we take some time off, easy, but then we come back to the show and it feels like we never skipped a beat. Before we get into grands, there's one thing I wanted to talk about. When I said in the intro that this Milwaukee regional felt like a cosmic event, it really did feel like things had been turned upside down. We had Elam, Rise, and Pocket in this tournament, and they all came into day two in the loser side of the bracket, which is just such a weird thing to have happen in an NA regional, excuse me. And we had other trainers like LW Josh or like Teddy Bear or Dapper Disc or MeteorFallian that were actually on the winner side bracket. Things that we would expect to be inverted. So I had the question in my mind. I asked myself, what happened to NA's top three players? Did they cannibalize each other? Was there something else that happened? So I went through their bracket runs. I'll just do this real quick. Pocket made it to Group A winners finals, but he was defeated by Dapper Disc. He defeated Rangasamy 2-1 to advance to day number two. In day number two, Pocket beat Tomahawk and J Mills, but he was knocked out by Rise in round three, which is just such a funny matchup as well. I'm not sure if the casters mentioned this, but this is literally a Milwaukee champ versus Milwaukee champ rematch, showdown, whatever you want to call it, in round three of losers in day two, which is amazing. Rise to Occasion took down Bosock Sky, but was beaten by MeteorFallian in round three of Group C and day number one. He did defeat Mormon Matt, No Cape, and Flying Pizza to punch his ticket to day number two. In day two, he had a really strong run. He beat Valorash, De-Illusion, Out of Pocket, and he won the rematch versus Dapper Disc, but he was knocked out 0-2 clean sweep by Pranav. And then finally, Elam took down Uzuku and Crispy Chris in rounds 2 and 3 of day one. Uzuku is one of my favorite players to watch. He was really impressive on stream a year or two ago. I hope he gets back to the podium soon because he's very, very, very good. But he was defeated by Teddy Bear in the Group B finals. And then finally, Elam in day number two, he beat Spandalicio and Dre Flames, but was also knocked out by Pranav. So Pranav took down Rise and Elam on his way to the grand finals. And you and I kind of discussed this over DMs. It says something about the competitive scene that you're not seeing the same champions rise up and win the tournaments this season. Steinar and MeteorFallian as the two first NA champs, I don't think that was on anyone's bingo board.
Yeah, and honestly, I am so happy with this development because this is like a stat that I think I brought up before because I was so frustrated with it. Like, not to take anything away from any NA regional champion that we have seen over the past year and a half, but the last NA champion that we saw that hadn't already been to a grand final in either the years 2022 or 23 was Abhinav all the way back in January 2024 in Portland, I believe. And since then, every single regional champion in North America already had seen a grand final within the first 2 years of the circuit. So it was really only the old guard and people who had already a lot of success who took home the titles. So to see like two surprise champions, like I feel as if like Steiner wasn't really much of a surprise champion in terms of previous results and general like acknowledged ability, but with MeteorFallian we had somebody who also had like kind of his heyday in 2023, got known for using that Bastiodon a lot. Finished I think ninth place, seventh place, seventh place. That were the career highest finishes in that season. Um, Still was a consistent competitor in the circuit, but never really reached those heights again. Even dropped Bastiodon entirely for the 2025 season, and now returns to become a champion with his signature pick after picking it back up again and making that FEAROW meta read that proved so effective. I
Yeah.
think that is just like a wonderful story that even in North America, which we always discuss as so top heavy, you can persevere and become a champion by just like sticking to your favorites, putting yourself out there, and just having it be your day for once. And it's
Hmm.
not just like you have to be the perfect, oh, I top cut every single regional I attend and I play like a machine type of player. You can just have it be your day. Like just come back from losing the first half of the grand finals 0-3, then adapting to your opponent's team, and it felt like an anime moment almost, where the hero is an unlikely one, and that is something that I, as a viewer, as just like a fan of the game, really appreciate, because even though like I have so much respect for all those super consistent top competitors, for for those repeat champions, I'm rooting for the underdog. And
Hmm.
seeing the underdog take it all, even though it was a Barcelona and I still have PTSD from Pittsburgh, um, I think this was one of my favorite regionals to watch, just from the
Wow.
macro narrative that came with it, personally.
Yeah. It's yeah, so I feel like once you get the same result for a certain period of time, it almost starts to feel kind of scripted, right? Maybe there's like a invisible hand, not the economic one, but there's an invisible hand kind of guiding the tournament as it progresses, and you just assume, all right, well, Rise is in the tournament, we'll see him in the losers finals or winners finals, right? You just kind of assume that these things are going to happen, and I feel like what we saw in Milwaukee was such a interesting combination of unexpected plays and kind of like awkward plays. It's one of these things where, if, for example, if you watch any other sport and you watch it at the highest level, you say, okay, well, I know this player is going to make this shot, or I know that they're going to defend the goal, or I know that whatever is going to happen is that usually happens is going to happen. But then you put on like college sports and you say, wow, this is wild. I have no idea what's going to happen next, because there's such a variance in terms of skill ability and skill expression that I don't know, either team or either player could suddenly trigger an upset, and that's just how it goes. So I felt like this was more of like watching college football or college matchups, right? There was just many more variables, which I don't normally expect. And yeah, again, when you look at this bracket, you see some of these names. A lot of people that tuned into the streams in 2022 or 2023, they would have said, "Oh yeah, well, we'll see Pocket in grand finals," or "Oh, here comes Elam again." And if they would have seen this result, they would be shocked, right? And I wonder as well, like from a skill expression perspective, when you look at the world's results from Anaheim, you look at Steinar winning in Pittsburgh, and yourself being in the grand finals, two non-North American trainers in grands, and then you look at this tournament with our old guard, our top NA trainers falling in the losers bracket. It makes you wonder if the skill expression in NA is top heavy or if it's degrading over time. I don't know. I mean, is that a valid question?
I personally feel as if a moment like this was just overdue because we had
Ah,
this insane level of consistency over so many, many months. Like you had in Europe last season. Obviously, it's not as if all the regional champions that were crowned last season were surprising ones, but you still had people that managed to rise to the top for the first time, be it somebody like Kazim, who always had
mm,
good GBL results, couldn't really put it together and play Pokemon, won the first event of the season, later followed it up with an insane run at EUIC. Whether it be somebody like Icelandic Lapras, who took
mm,
Birmingham after, like, again, a very similar pattern of, okay, like, I'm a leaderboard level player, but when will it really click for me and play Pokemon? And then you can have games that feel a little nervous, maybe not always super, like, you don't really go into your matches thinking, oh, I'll 2-0, I'll 3-0 this opponent, but it's close battles. It's maybe like a bunch of 2-1s, but I'm winning today. And I can really assess my very best competitive self on this day. And we had moments like that in Europe. Like we have them all the time, I would even say. Like we
yeah,
have our
I agree.
top competitors. Like you know when Patoman enters a tourney, he's going to make it far. But we always had room for people who were good, but still felt like I don't know. Not to say that NA top players don't feel like human beings, but they have like machine-like precision almost in how consistently they achieve their heights. Um, and yeah, also if you and this is like a fun exercise that I did ahead of our recording. If you look at the win percentage, so the
Mm,
games won, not the overall sets won, but just like the games won. The this year's Milwaukee event was actually the least dominant event by any champion so far, which is not necessarily a negative. It just means that this was an event that wasn't one-sided in a way previous events have been. It just means that, oh, like you don't have to have a 100% win rate like Rajev or Philbeck when they won their events that they just swept to rise to the
mm,
top. MeteorFallian still had a very impressive 62% win rate overall in games. Um, but yeah, I think it just really goes to show that being a quote unquote normal good player and being a champion aren't mutually exclusive. And I think that is such
mm,
a hopeful message. Not only is it a lovely story for MeteorFallian, but also for people who may have struggled with similar results in the future where they haven't really reached the heights that they feel they're capable of. And now they have another example to keep on trying is what I'm getting from this event, which is why I love the outcome so much, even though there was some heartbreak associated. Like we've been talking about just like the event itself, about MeteorFallian a lot, but Pranav on the other side of the table is also, I think, a player who maybe entered the Play Pokemon Championship Series back in the day as somebody who knows he's one of the best in GBL
mhm.
and who was like awaiting Play Pokemon breakthroughs. And I know he has like a lot of real life things going on and can't really dedicate as much time and energy to competitive Pokemon as he maybe could have in the past. But between his second place and the way he played this weekend, and the fact that, oh, even if you haven't been like a champion all the way back in 2022 and 2023, you can still make it. I kind of want to see more of Pranav as well after this event because there's like a category of players. I feel like Maxi Million P in Europe is another one of those where you know them from the GBL leaderboards, you know them from
Yes.
occasional deep runs, and you just like kind of wait for this inconsistent genius to take their gold eventually. And I feel as if like Pranav again one step closer, um, and really hopeful to see him compete more because I'm not saying we're all going to make it. We're all going to be regional champions eventually, but everybody has the chance. And that is something that I haven't really felt as strongly in North America for a long time.
Let's be real. Pranav has got about a billion things going on, maybe 2 billion or
Oh,
3 billion.
things, not dollars? Okay.
Oh, yes. Well, things being dollars, of course. I mean, $1 billion plays all weekend, and yeah, $1 billion smile as well. But yeah, I do feel like those a few of those plays in the grand finals. I mean, you and I talked about this before we pressed record. There was one game where Pranav's Galarian Corsola saved him, and there was another game where the opposing Galarian Corsola absolutely crushed his dreams. So you give some and you get some. Pranav was ninth in Peoria in 2024. 2025, he had a couple of really good tournaments. He had a fifth place overall finish in Milwaukee, and then a fifth place overall in Portland. And then this is actually his career best finish this past event in Milwaukee 2026, where he was the runner up. Um, I feel like you danced around it a little bit, but you put a lot of work into this win percentage breakdown, and I really would love for you to kind of list it as you did in the DM to me, because it's so informative and it really shows the perspective. I mean, seriously, guys, we're talking about a 30% difference in win rate between the most mechanically consistent and perfect players to ever do it and MeteorFallian's championship, but they both have those gold medals. They are both regional champions. And that margin of 30%, that's massive. That's 1 in 3, right? So I don't know. I don't know if you were comfortable doing it, but I would love for you to just run down this list from like best
Yeah,
performance to
I can
MeteorFallian
I can
to
go
show
through it,
people.
and I also want to point out that in the Pokemon theme song, they say, "I want to be the very best," and not "I want to be the very best by the widest margin." The margin does not matter. A gold is a gold.
It's true. I think
Um,
that was in the first draft of the song, but it was too wordy, so they cut it off.
this
They
may be
chopped it
true.
out.
This may be true. Okay,
Okay.
so in terms of our best ever or like most um, dominant
Dominant.
ever performances, um, at regional championships. We have Elenius Rajev in Curitiba 2024, as well as Philbeck in Bologna 2025, who both went 18-0 and therefore are the only competitors to accomplish the undefeated tournament sweep. Then we have a very close second or third in this case behind those two, Jakobovic at the 2023 OCIC, who took the title at a 94.7% win rate, only dropping one singular game, and that was in round one against somebody who had a best buddy Aaron on their team. It's not a Lairon, it's not an Agron, it's an Aaron. Um, so if
Wow.
his tournament dreams ended then and there, it would have been a very different OCIC. Um, Another very impressive, very memorable title run was that of Human Ketchup in 2023's Liverpool Regional Championship, where he managed to, I think there were two losses the entire tournament, and he got a 91% win rate with Shadow Charizard. Then fairly recently, Junebug in 2025's Monterrey Regional Championship with a
Mhm.
90.3 percentage. And one of my favorite tournament runs ever that I witnessed as just a viewer from home was Inadequence's first regional or special event championship, where he took
Mm.
Giratina to a 26-3 finish, and that is an 89.6% win rate. So those are
Mm.
some highlights over the years of competitive play from the most dominant performers. Whereas on the lower end, we now have the 62% win rate for FEAROW and Bastiodon in Milwaukee. And that dethrones Out of Pocket in Peoria 2023, where he took the title on a 65.5% win rate. Um, Seven of his losses came at the hands of Enhoff, who he beat 8 times to take home one of the most insane 15 game series we've ever witnessed.
Yes.
Um, and another very memorable grand finals that had somebody emerge with a title at a fairly low win rate is European great Patoman in Gdansk 2024, where he faced Tonton Matus's Seeking, Arctibax, and Clefable in the grand finals.
That's
But
right.
yeah, the Alolan Ninetales prevailed to take that tournament with a 66.7% win rate. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, like a lot of variation. I think a theme is that most of the low win rates come from tournaments where there's a bracket reset, with our third and second place coming from champions that reset the bracket from the loser side. Whereas in Milwaukee, we had somebody enter from the winner's side and then prevailing and finding the right strategy in the exact right moment after losing the first best of 5-0-3.
I feel like those dominant storylines get pumped up so much. I very fondly remember the discussions around Human Catcher Bug with his Charizard win. Everyone was asking, "Oh, is he better than Harjef, or is he better than Yako, or what's going on? You know, is this the most complete trainer currently in the championship series?" And I feel like these debates are always fun to talk about, and they do dominate the headlines. And I think a lot of trainers that are maybe new to the scene, or maybe they're just kind of on the peripheral, they're not as ingrained as you and I feel like they probably look at those headlines and they say, well, if this guy is getting 91% win rates, or if I need a 95% win rate like Yako to win a tournament, then it's never going to happen for me, because that's just way too difficult. And so many things have to line up to get that many wins in a row. And it's very, very challenging. But yeah, to your point, I mean, 62% for MeteorFallian, the quote unquote least dominant performance. But hey, he shares that gold medal, just like Harjef, just like Yako, just like all these other trainers who won their tournaments. And I feel like
Exactly.
there's some kind of Go Battle League pun in there somewhere, where if you win more than 50% of your games, you will get legend eventually. So keep on grinding, everybody.
This is true. This is true. If you win 51% of your battles, you will get that regional title eventually. But no, like another thing that I want to point out,
Yeah.
when we talk about least dominant, that is, in my opinion, not putting MeteorFallian down, because he shares that podium of the least dominance with international champions Out of Pocket and Pataman. So honestly, that's great company to keep. And again, like
Yeah.
doing it with FEAROW, that's levels of spice that many can only dream of achieving. So yeah, are we do we feel ready to jump into those battles, or is there something else you want to highlight before Speedy?
No, and I just agree with your point. I think that sometimes if you are a top tier player like Philbeg, and everything is clicking for you on that weekend, everything is perfect, and you're winning all your battles, that's fine. But not every race to gold is as simple, or has such a straight path. And I feel like MeteorFallian had the most obstacles and most kind of stumbles to overcome, and that's honestly a testament to the resilience and the adaptability, which we also saw all the way to the grand finals reset. So, yeah, let's talk about grand finals. We had Pranav, who had just disposed of two of NA's best in Elam and Rise to Occasion. He was heating up, he was on fire, I'm sure his butler was in the car waiting for him, thought he would end his tournament run earlier, but he did not. He stayed up on that stage. So, Pranav defeats LW Josh 3-1, and then he rises up to the grand finals after being, I think, yeah, Pranav entered day two on the loser side bracket and just grinded through the
Yes.
entire loser side. Okay, so what happened? MeteorFallian, I thought he was the champion. How can he go 0-3 in the grand finals? What the helly?
Well, it all looked fine in the very first game when we had a Bastiodon staring down a Murkrow, which is the dream, honestly. But this is where I would say that MeteorFallian did learn the matchup on the fly. And this is the very first game, so there's still some insecurity about around how do I respond to the strategies that Pranav had in mind. Because Pranav in this matchup, it will be displayed on the YouTube screen right here, right now.
Yes.
Um, he did have the advantage of his Corviknight essentially being unchecked. I feel like Pranav kind of looked at the Iomero team that did so well in previous events and then thought, oh, how do I tweak it in a way that I have a little bit more flexibility? And if you ask for flexibility rather than hard wins, you're talking Corviknight. So he did go for that double curved
Double
that was
flyer.
I was so close to say the double. It's fine. Maybe we cut this from the
No, it's
recording.
okay. Everyone in the YouTube comments, type what you think ZZ was going to say. But for now, we can move on.
Yeah, he did have the double flyers with Murkrow and Corviknight, where he has like two Pokemon that look fairly identical but do very different things, and that the one is
Agreed.
horrible against Bastiodon, whereas the other is like so much bulkier. It has Sand Attack to do fast move damage. It has Steel as its defensive typing. So really took advantage of that flexibility and pivots it immediately. So the response that MeteorFallian has in game one is his Corsola, and while that is not necessarily a horrible response, that is a fairly neutral matchup, and Corsola with the more consistent damage output is typically able to take it. You will have to shield paybacks to make that work. So Pranav does get the shield advantage in that secondary matchup, essentially decides, oh, I will not be able to win switch advantage here because the Corsola would farm my Corviknight down. So what I will do instead is I hard pivot back into my Murkrow to snipe all the energy away from that Corsola that it had built up, and therefore
Mhm.
deny the charge attack. That still means that you will have your Murkrow on the Bastiodon, which is not where you want to be, but you chip it into essentially one Mud Bomb range, and then you unleash your shield advantage, Unova Stunfisk in the back, on that weakened Bastiodon, and on a Blastoise that is not only a shield down, but also has to swap in and is therefore never able to outpace your Unova Stunfisk, which just does consistent, super effective damage with discharges and with Thundershocks. So even though it looked really favorable for MeteorFallian in the lead, because there was no clear plan to play around Corviknight's safe swap without giving up shield advantage, and because Unovan Stunfisk was so well positioned to break the core of Blastoise and Bastiodon,
Yes.
game number one did go to Pranav.
I remember watching it. I remember watching back game number one, and when you see Pranav instantly go to Corviknight and MeteorFallian goes Galarian Corsola instead of or instead of Blastoise, I was like, what's going on? Like, why would you not choose the Blastoise here? But yeah, to exactly to your point, and I think that also influenced game number two because in game number two, we did see the Bastiodon lead from MeteorFallian, so he doubled down on his core pick. This time, Pranav led Cradilly. And because we didn't see that instant swap to Blastoise in game number one, Pranav swaps to that Corviknight in game number two to counter the Bastiodon lead. So you notice Pranav in game number one, he went with his Corviknight Unova Stunfisk because I thought the Stunfisk was a great pick, especially against the Blastoise and Bastiodon. But then he pivots to Cradilly and Corviknight Core in order to support more of the Blastoise action. Because I mean, let's be real, Unova Stunfisk doesn't take any damage from rollouts, but it does not appreciate the Hydro Cannon, and I think that Cradilly gives it a bit more flexibility. I think that Pranav also got to see a bit of how Cradilly plays into MeteorFallian's team when MeteorFallian played LW Josh earlier on stream, because that was a really tough matchup for Josh, looking at how he didn't have any answers to FEAROW. And the presence of the Unova Stunfisk on Pranav's team did keep the FEAROW at bay at times. But yeah, I think that he got to see firsthand that Cradilly could be a nice little wedge, not a strong answer, but a nice kind of buffer to kind of give himself some more play with the switch timer, and express his skill ceiling, which I think was really important for him. But yeah, I don't know if you want to go into game two in detail or game three, but this was a pretty
I
dominant
think,
series for Pranav.
yeah, I think in game two there is the situation where um, Pranav catches a move on his Corsola, the one that we mentioned before, where the endgame comes down to Pranav's Corsola hanging on by like 1 HP in the fast move down against the Bastiodon. And because MeteorFallian did throw the Flamethrower rather than the same type attack bonus Stone Edge, that is why the Corsola was left with that extra HP. Also, not to take away from Pranav, there was also some excellent energy management going on to even maneuver himself into that position.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, maybe a MeteorFallian assuming that there could be something like the Fortress coming in, but a little bit too hastily throwing the energy and therefore not doing as much damage as he could have into the Corsola, enabled Pranav to have that win condition. And again, like Corsola IVs matter, and sometimes you do hang on with that crucial 1 HP. Otherwise, the game probably would have gone to a replay because 3-turn fast attack versus 3-turn fast attack could have been a simultaneous KO, but in this case, the game goes to Pranav.
You know,
Um,
in game number 2, seeing the Galarian Corsola survive on just 1 HP to win the game, in film, they call that foreshadowing. And we will get into that later on in the grand finals reset. But yeah, you absolutely nailed it. I have in my notes, Pranav throws double air cutters instead of 1 payback into Corsola. Pranav catches flamethrower on Galarian Corsola, and then Pranav survives with 1 HP versus Bastiodon to win the game. So heading into game number 3, we see the Galarian Corsola lead this time from MeteorFallian into the Corviknight. It looks like Pranav he connected the payback into the Galarian Corsola, swapped to Cradilly, MeteorFallian goes Bastiodon. The key in this game for me was Pranav getting to the 4th Grass Knot versus Basti. That applied way more pressure than I think MeteorFallian was ready for. And it looked grim after that because there was this reprieve, right? Oh, 4th Grass Knot. Maybe I'm cooking here. And then Pranav brings out his Murkrow to match up against Blastoise, which is not good in terms of rollout damage. But luckily for Pranav, his Murkrow is able to double up on the Drill Pecks, and he swept the Galarian Corsola and Blastoise in the back to win that game. So that game was really close as well.
Yeah, for that game, I actually have 2 notes. The one you pointed out is where MeteorFallian tried to commit to the fast attack down with the smackdowns against the Cradilly, but by taking that Grass Knot, he is getting put into Sandatac downrange for the Corviknight, so he is not able to get to use all of his energy and may have been better advised to use some of it earlier to avoid that Grass Knot damage. And in the end game, I did look at the Sims, and if you just go for a Skull Bash early and then never throw a charged attack again, the Blastoise will be able to survive long enough against the Murkrow to fast attack it down far enough so that the low health or like yellow health Corsola in the back would be able to land 3 Astonishes and farm down the Murkrow before it gets to its final move. This is a little counterintuitive, but just because of that super fast 10-turn pacing to Drill Packs, Blastoise is actually not able to outspam a Murkrow just because the first Hydro Cannon takes 12 turns, just because of how a rollout is like 1 short of a Hydro Cannon after 3 attacks. So you always need the 4th rollout for your first Hydro, and then you have the nice pacing. So yeah, charge attacks fortunately weren't the way. MeteorFallian does try for a play with a catch, but Pranav actually anticipates it and denies that opportunity. Then finally manages his Murkrow energy perfectly, gets to 2 moves, takes out both the Corsola and the Blastoise. But yeah, I would have really loved that cheeky Skull Bash just to increase your durability in that matchup and then fast attack everything down.
But that's the difference, right? That's the difference between someone who is maniacally looking at Sims and asking for scrims, maybe even their post and ORAC get reacted to with a job application emote like Pocket. That's where those players that look at the 2-shield matchup, they remove Hydro Cannon from Blastoise's tool set and say, well, what if I do this? What if I Skull Bash? What if I roll out through? And they actually get deep into the simulations and look at what's possible and realize those win conditions in real time. And MeteorFallian just had such a different approach, right? You look at the win rate, you look at his performance in the past, you look at his unconventional wins in Milwaukee. It was a very different tempo and a very different approach from this trainer. So looking at this grand finals, right? For me, after seeing so many dominant players win championships over these past 4 years, I was thinking, okay, well, he goofed up by not going Blastoise into the Corviknight in game number 1. He goofed up by trying to smack down the Cradilly to death in game number 2. And then he messed up again in game number 3 by not throwing the Skull Bash and rollouting down, like as you pointed out. So to me, I'm thinking maybe Meteor doesn't know what he's doing. Maybe this is a situation where Pranav and his skill expression is just going to overwhelm Meteor. But what was silently happening in the background, you've alluded to this a couple times, was that the gears were turning. There were calculations being made, and there were adjustments being kept in mind much more than I think a lot of people give Meteor credit for. There was a lot of thought going into what was going to happen next, because after an 0-3, a lot of players, rightfully so, would be mentally crippled, and they would say, well, this just isn't a good matchup for me. I don't have the team combat advantage. My opponent's in my head, whatever line of reasoning. But MeteorFallian kind of pushed against the tide. And I think that shows with the leads in the grand finals reset. Galarian Corsola into Fortress. I'm not sure, honestly, ZZ, I'm not sure what possessed uh, Pranav to lead Fortress. I don't see that many targets for it, but he went with it, and that was not a good lead.
I think personally, what happened when Pranav brought out the fortress is that he thought he had just baited Meteor into bringing that Credilli that looked so strong into, like, not even so strong, but it looked like a core breaker to a lot of the things that Pranav leaned into otherwise, whether it be the Murkrow, which could be one shot and where you also could tank a move from, or the Covenite, which does look like a neutral enough matchup, but Credilli is actually surprisingly comfortable in there, even with the double resisted assets. It's just the power of pacing and Rock Tomb.
Yes.
And yeah, occasionally Pranav just played soft to that Credilli and then probably tried to punishing it by inviting it before. But yeah, this backfires in this instance because the fortress doesn't really have a great target on MeteorFallian's line at all. And the Corsola is probably the worst target because the bug bites are resisted by that ghost type.
Exactly. Full trios for this game number one: Galarian Corsola, Blastoise, and Bastiodon. So not a whole lot of changes. I think he ran this line once before. And then Pranav with Unova Stunfisk, going back to that Pokemon after leaning heavily into Cradily to close out games 2 and 3 of the grand finals. He goes back to the Stunfisk and has the Corviknight as well. I have in my notes here that Pranav swaps immediately to his Corviknight to get out of that Galarian Corsola versus Fortress matchup, and Meteor goes Blastoise. So already, bam, game one, we're seeing a correction from what we saw in the grand finals the first time. Staying in with the Galarian Corsola versus the Corviknight, no, this time MeteorFallian goes Blastoise into that safe swap. The second payback from the Corviknight does force a shield from the Blastoise, but MeteorFallian does a couple of interesting things here. I think at the very end, he actually swaps in his Galarian Corsola and then shields a Rock Tomb or something like that. And I was a little bit confused as to why he would do that. But it turns out that the energy on his Galarian Corsola was what really tied up the game. And I couldn't see where he was going with it, but in the end, it made sense.
Exactly. Let me check where we are in my notes right here.
Okay.
Oh, there's an interesting one. The game two is so interesting to me
Yeah.
because now we move into game two with a Murkrow lead into Corsola, which is actually
Very good for
exactly
Pranav.
where Pranav's Murkrow wants to be. But after just getting dismantled with the fortress the game before, there's not really a good response to the Credilli that then comes in for Meteor. Um, so what Pranav does is he stays in with the Murkrow for quite a long time. Eventually gets to chip it with a drill pack. But what ends up happening is a Rock Tomb catch onto Unovan Stunfisk. So Pranav actually um, going for a very counterintuitive play, bringing the ground electric type into the grass type. But at that point, it is sufficiently weakened and neutralized, and you do
Mm-hmm.
catch that resisted rock type damage. However, by playing it out this way, in a 45-second switch timer economy, that does enable MeteorFallian to essentially pivot back in a pretty timely fashion. So let me check where. Oh yeah. This game ends up with Ufisk energy being the deciding factor, as both kind of switch with aligned timers and store energy respectively. Um, and that stored energy on the Innovan Stunfisk is then later on used by Pranav to snipe the energy from a Bastiodon that again had more than a move loaded up at that point. Plus,
Exactly.
the Unova Stunfisk also gets to another move versus Corsola. So really putting in overtime with that Pokemon that initially got swapped into the Grass type, which is typically one of its harder counters on MeteorFallian's side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have in my notes Pranav swaps and CMP ties Basti with Ufisk, gets the knockout. And then there was the double charge move Murkrow winning the game. So Pranav strikes back, evening out the series 1-1 here in our grand finals reset. Interesting note, this is the last time that Meteor is going to play Bastiodon in the entire tournament. There's still 3 more games, but he makes even more adjustments going into game number 3. So let's jump right in. Game number 3, we see a Cradilly mirror match in the lead. The full team is Cradilly, FEAROW, and Shadow Kanto Marowak. So the first appearance of FEAROW in the grand finals for Meteor, taking on the Cradilly, Fortress, and Corviknight. So, like you pointed out with the Fortress in game number 1 of the reset, I think that Pranav wants to see that Cradilly line up against the Fortress, or maybe go for the Bastiodon as like a second best option because you can still Sand Tomb it to hell. But he gets neither of those in this battle number 3. So Cradilly wins a charge tech priority in the mirror, which is really big. Meteor's
Mhm.
Cradilly wins a charge tech priority in the mirror, which is really big for him. But in spite of that, MeteorFallian still swaps in with his FEAROW, which again, like doing unconventional things. There was a matchup against LW
I don't
Josh where
mind
go
this
ahead.
play actually because
Really?
once you are in like drill peck range or like even in farmland range with your Credilli, as like I'm a big enthusiast when it comes to some of those unconventional pack users, right? I've been playing a lot of Shadow 2 Cannon in GBL as well as in practice. And it has happened more than once that I hard swap into a Credilli that I know will not be reaching a move before I reach mine because the assets are not that threatening and the pacing on those drill pack users, like it's just 10 turns every time and it's favorable against Credilli. So once it's weakened, the matchup isn't actually that terrible. And another thing that um, this accomplishes here is to draw out the Corviknight, which could be a good thing for the Kanto Marowak that Meteor has in the back in case the only answer that Pranav brought would have been that flying steel type, especially because thanks to that aggressive swap, FEAROW does get a little bit of an energy head start, and that
Mm,
enables it to get to a third drill pack in the end, which does make that matchup a lot closer than you would think, given that FEAROW only hits for resisted damage. Um, but yeah, the end game unfortunately does end up being quite dire for Meteor, as all shields will still be in play at that point. And if you have a bug bite user, which again, it's now 4 damage per turn, so it's a very high damage fast attack. Plus, you have Sand Tomb on your side as the fortress, and therefore you will be able, thanks to your debuffing move, thanks to your superior stat product, you just munch through the mud slapping Kanto Marowak, and the Credilli that was being saved with a little bit of health doesn't really matter because super effective bug bites just decimate that, making it a 2-1 for Pranav at this point.
yeah, I remember when MeteorFallian let the Sand Tomb through and no shielded it. I remember Pranav like looked at the camera. He's like, "What? There's a chance?" And
It did not matter. It did not
yeah,
matter because even if it was shielded, the fast attack damage would have been overwhelming. But yeah, certainly, like, might as well shield it. What else are you going to shield type of deal? But yeah, I
yeah.
don't think it really shifted that game into any direction.
Slightly off topic, but we haven't made any shorts, like clips from our show into short form content. But I feel like I've been playing a lot of Shadow 2 Cannon and Go Battle League has got to be one of them because I never expected to hear such insanity, but I shouldn't be that surprised, right? I mean, look who
It
I'm
is
talking to.
currently on the draft for my Gdansk team, and I am very unlikely to take it off that draft.
Oh my God. All right. Well, everyone, they say that one of the most important things in life is having something to look forward to. So put that on your calendar. Gdansk, maybe potentially Shadow Toucanon from ZZ. All right, so we'll see how it goes. But Pranav is one game away from winning the Grand Finals reset. He already did a 3-0 in the first Grand Finals set. He stumbled a bit in game number one, but he is right at the ship. He's one win away from becoming your Milwaukee Regional Champion, coming from the loser side bracket as well to start day number two. An insanely deep run so far. So jumping right into it, game number four, one game away, Pranav, and then MeteorFallian needs to win the next two. He needs to win out to become the champion. Game number four, we get Galarian Corsola leads on both sides. The full trios are Galarian Corsola, Blastoise, and again the FEAROW from MeteorFallian taking on Galarian Corsola, Cradily, and Corviknight for Pranav. So in this lead situation, Pranav goes Corviknight. He actually cap ties the Galarian Corsola, connects an air cutter, and then Blastoise comes out to answer the Corviknight again. So at this point, Pranav's kind of got to be expecting this to happen. I have in my notes here 2-shield FEAROW. I believe that in the mid game, MeteorFallian 2-shields his FEAROW, uses all his resources on that. But I'll refer to your notes as I think they're a bit more thorough. Meteor shields Blastoise, Pranav catches DP on Corsola, which I assume is Drill Peck. And then FEAROW gets Drill Peck one turn before the Corviknight gets the payback. And that clutches a very close win in game number four for Meteor.
Yeah. There was there was a lot of switching on Pranav's end, which didn't really end up working too well in his favor, I would say, because there was like a moment where MeteorFallian even sneaks a full rollout with Blastoise after making a catch, and at the end of the day, I feel as if I don't know, I won't say like Pranav outmaneuvered himself there,
Yeah.
but yeah, just it feels like a very even matchup as it tends to feel when there's a mirror in the lead. But yeah, just with the superior pacing, it's just that Meteor gets a little bit more value out of each and every of his Pokemon.
Mhm.
And yeah, at that point, I think I was like typing in chat that Blastoise kind of, even though it's not really been the Pokemon that he brought the most, it's been the Pokemon that showed up the most. Because like FEAROW is nice and all, but like you look at the teams, it doesn't really have the clearest targets beyond maybe Corsola. And Blastoise, it's just it's like the best response to Corviknight, which is coming every game. And even if you invest resources into it, and I think that is something that makes Blastoise so good and makes its potency a little bit underrepresented in Sims. Even if you invest resources into it, you typically exit with a Hydro Cannon, which is a community day move. Very powerful, very useful, and therefore just having the Blastoise to just like move around a little here and there, protect it from opposing Credilis by chipping that down and bringing in the FEAROW with the even better initial pacing to take on that. You get so much value out of a Pokemon which merely looks neutral in Sims. And again, this is why I feel as if Blastoise is a very good example for why being dominant doesn't equal being good, because none of its wins are truly dominant, but you can still get so much value out of it if you play it the right way. And especially with that catch and sneak, which is one of my favorite techniques, Meteor did a good job at that in game four. Before we go into the very last game of the tournament, we have a Pecker into a Pecker, we have a FEAROW into a Murkrow. Then the remaining Pokemon are obviously Corsola for Meteor, Corviknight for Pranav, and then also a very sneaky matchup with Credilli on Pranav's side and Kanto Marowak, Shadow Kanto Marowak on MeteorFallian's side. And yeah, I think Boom20 was actually the one and only person to shout that out in Twitch chat, that when Meteor found himself shieldless with his Marowak into the Credilli, it didn't actually look bad for him,
Hmm.
because if the Cradily runs Acid, which is the preferred move currently, you don't just cleanly one-shot a good IV Canto Marowak with your Grass Knot.
Yes.
And what instead ended up happening was the simultaneous KO, actually, because you just can't really acid that Pokemon down without sacrificing the entirety of your own health. And yeah, so it starts with both Pekkas investing both shields to neutralize each other. Um, and we have Corsola into Corvi, eventually Credillia into Marowak, and it comes down to whether an Air Cutter from Corviknight, which is in one Astonish range, plus one Sand Attack, which Pranav does throw. Like people were wondering,
Yes.
oh, did he need to do
Yes.
one more? If you look at Meteor's screen during that matchup, you see the Sand Attack animation. You don't really see it on Pranav's end, but you see it on Meteor's end. So the
Yes.
Sand Attack has been performed. That one Sand Attack and the Air Cutter come one, maybe two HP away from knocking out the Corsola. It is the last Pokemon that still stands in Milwaukee, and MeteorFallian is the Milwaukee Regional Champion.
It's such a micro adjustment because when you're up against a 3-turn fast attack like Astonish, with Corviknight, you can throw the one single sand attack. If you throw the second sand attack, that means you're throwing your air cutter on turn 3, which is the same turn that the damage from the Astonish actually applies. So then you're running a really risky gambit there
Yes,
where
yes, yes.
one of three things happen, right? Either one, you faint to the Astonish damage. Two, you get DRE and you get the second sand attack plus the air cutter, and then you might win. Or situation 3, you do get DRE and you get the knockout, but then you go to a match review and you likely get a rematch situation, right? So
I
it felt
personally
like,
believe that a rematch can't be granted for DRE
yeah,
scenarios, but it would be
yeah,
really awkward for the judges to have to decide that too. So,
yeah.
yeah,
This
at
one,
the end of the day,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to point out this one. If I could draw some more vibrant analogies here, this one felt like an old Western showdown where Pranav and Meteor met at high noon, and they both emptied their pistols to start off here. And you had the FEAROW and the Murkrow both double shielding in the lead, and then no shields were in play for the rest of the game, right? So you burn both. Oh, you burn all 4 shields, 2 on both sides, immediately, right? Just right off the rip. And then they went into like a fist fight. And it was really just mano a mano, Marowak versus Cradily, mano a mano, Galarian Corsola versus Corviknight. And in a heartbreaker, as you pointed out, with just 1 or 2 HP remaining, the Galarian Corsola did for Meteor what it did for Pranav earlier on in the series, surviving on just 1 HP to win the title. And you could see Pranav just put his head in his hands. He just couldn't believe it, because I felt like he was close. I felt like he had it, throwing the move. I thought that was it. But by the hair on his chin there, MeteorFallian was able to win that matchup. And I feel like that is just so analogous to his entire run, just bringing things to the absolute limit, down to the wire, and then getting that clutch win at the very end to win the championship. So
It was
uh,
fantastic television.
it
And
was.
obviously, like this is merely hindsight, and I will not say that I would have played it much differently if I was in Pranav's situation in that matchup. But I think a way to win that match, to win that endgame from the position the players found themselves in, would have been to use the air cutter to chip the Kanto Marowak into grass knot range, and then overload on energy on the Credilli up until the moment where Marowak is like a turn away from reaching the second Bone Club, and then trying to make the move against the Corsola to instead take out with a grass knot in the end. I think that
Mm,
would have been possible, but how, like, if you don't really want to be in a position where you lose turns by making another decision to like throw an attack because you like the Kantomarovac wasn't revealed at that point. Maybe it would be important to really switch super fast. So you have like a split second, like zero point 0.5 seconds to make that decision, to make the calculations. How do I take out the Pokemon that just appeared on my screen? Could have still been 4 different Pokemon at this point.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
yeah, especially if it was so close to just like being enough with the air cutter anyway, against the Corsola. So yeah, like a little bit of a heartbreaking ending, but um, fantastic run by Pranav. I don't want to bring up win percentages again, but by virtue of having this very extensive losers run, Pranav's win percentage for a second place finisher was pretty high, and
Oh
it
yeah.
just goes to show that his overall gameplay um, that weekend was something he should certainly be proud of. And yeah, first grand finals appearance. Historically, most NA regional champions have been to a grand final before. So yeah, there's probably more to come in the future.
Well, here's the thing, right? If you're Pranav and you beat Rise, usually that's enough to win a championship. If you beat Rise and Elam, that's definitely enough to win an NA, right? I mean, that's what you expect to see in the top three or top four. But I think having to do it 3 times in a row was a tall ask. To take down elite trainers, I mean, 3 times in a row was definitely a tough ask. And yeah, I really appreciate your point. I think with perfect information that we have in hindsight, we can look at how the matchup could have gone differently. But just to reemphasize just how singular this grand finals reset game 5 was. You had the two shields in the lead. You had the simul KO with the Cradilly and the Marowak, and then like a hand of cards in poker, you just kind of were dealt the card, which was the last Pokemon in the back, and you just kind of had to deal with what you had. So it was just a really sticky situation for Pranav to be in. And I'm sure he's played this matchup over in his mind 1,000 times, trying to figure out what he could have done differently, which is something that a lot of players do when they get to that level and they don't quite clutch it out. It doesn't leave their minds, right? So, um, yeah, tough matchup for Pranav, but we have to give Meteor his flowers, like you said, breaking through, winning a championship in Milwaukee in impressive fashion. So, congrats to our friend Meteor. One question for you as we close up our Milwaukee recap here: is FEAROW fantastic, or is it just a fad?
uh, my fantastic friend Firo is not a fraud. I think it. Okay, there's some feathers in there that I could also start
Ah,
ruffling,
nice.
but yeah, I personally believe it's a real Pokemon. I think it has play. It does play differently from a Shadow Toucanon, which I personally prefer. It's a little more flexible in that it sports that drill run coverage, which did come in handy against. I think there was a Napoleon that was on the receiving end of a drill run before. And if
Oh
you're up
yeah.
a team with a Bastiodon, you have a way to fight back. If you have a Clodsire on the other end of the field, even though drill pegs do chunk, um, I believe that you never two shot with mere drill packs, and you need that drill run to really get that done. Like one drill pack, one drill run, probably enough. Um, so certainly some utility there. Then the pacing is fantastic. What I really like about normal flyers too, this doesn't really apply to MeteorFallian's team, but because you are not weak to fairies, you are able to run a normal flyer and a dark type on the same team. Um,
Mm,
which like sometimes you roll those into one and you have like a Murkrow or a Galarian Moltres, but
yes.
like they don't have the exact same utility. Like Pokemon like Fortress with its bug bites, they have a pretty decent matchup into the dark flyers, whereas the normal flyers just resist that fast attack pressure. So that is pretty nice as well. So yeah, I think Fearow definitely has a niche. I think it is here to stay in one of the more prominent spots of the Spice Cabinet. I don't believe it's going to be a consistent Pokemon that makes regional top eights, and certainly not usage top eights. But I think it's fairly likely that we will see another Fearow medal down the line.
Yeah. I think it takes a specific type of player to make that Pokemon work. And I think, again, sorry for everyone who doesn't like puns, but the stars really did align for MeteorFallian. All right, I said it. In terms of aligning his Bastiodon and his FEAROW on the same team. And I heard Henry say during the cast that apparently MeteorFallian had tried other Pokemon and he just really had come to admire FEAROW from his Go Battle League practice. He just thought it was such a good core breaker. A lot of teams were not ready for it, so took it right over from GBL into the
Yeah.
championship series, and it did wonders. So
The Go Battle weekend is actually coming up the weekend of Lille, so we're fairly
yes,
close at the time of recording. You get 20 sets per day. Make sure to get them all in because apparently you can discover some hidden gems if you just play your GBLs. So certainly encouraging everybody to just play the battles. What's the worst that could happen?
phew,
Yeah.
well,
So I think I have two more closing remarks when it comes to Milwaukee. The
yes,
one would be we have not really talked much about LW Josh at all yet, but this is a trainer who was yet to top cut heading into Milwaukee and came away with a bronze medal, which I think is just so impressive. And he's the highest finishing Clodsire player of the event, which I thought
ooh,
was probably the Pokemon that I missed most in my Pittsburgh Grand Finals because it just would have matched up so well. It is
yeah,
one of the few more neutral answers to Credilli, and it is also a ground type that has the ability to really put the hurt on flying types, at least most. Corviknight, not so much, but it is a fairly versatile Pokemon and really served LW Josh really well here. Certainly like a little bit of an explosion in terms of end placement. Does it have to do with talking for Nighttime Clasher for 1 hour? We don't know. It might. But certainly, yeah, Josh, just a really nice guy. I did talk to him at previous events and really happy for his performance. Um, one more thing,
yes.
H-Shira casting debut. We
Oh,
have
that's right. What'd you
really
think?
familiar faces on the NA cast, and yeah, I personally thought that she really grew into that role over the course of the weekend. I felt as if, which is like perfectly normal and natural, she had a little bit of a nervous-ish start where
Yeah.
it all needed to fall into place a little bit more. But by the end of it, I thought she looked like a natural, and I'm looking forward to see more of her on the official cast.
I was getting a few DMs over the weekend as well, and they basically shared the same sentiment that you had a day one debut H Shira who maybe had a bit more pauses, more ums, more uhs than she would have liked, but day one to day two H Shira was absolutely a not a step but a leap forward in terms of commentary, and I thought she had some really good insights, and I appreciate as well that she would fully express her point and kind of take over the microphone when she needed to in order to really say what she was thinking, what was on her mind, because her insights were very valuable. So when she was able to do that, it was really nice. And yeah, I thought that Caleb as well. You know, he's got a ton of experience casting, and he normally pairs with Butters. We all know that, but he was very good at helping to kind of guide her in terms of you know what she should be focusing on next and that kind of thing and filling the gaps. That's what I always say is easy about casting because you know I work with like a different co-caster at every single event. Your main role as a co-caster, especially if you're the more experienced one, is to recognize your co-commentator's strengths and then help them amplify those and then just fill in any weaknesses. You don't have to do that much. You just have to really make your co-caster shine. And I think that that we see that. And I like that we're bringing in new talent. We will allude to this in terms of the EU scene as well pretty soon. But I like that we're bringing in new talent and letting people shine. And yeah, I thought H. Shira. I'm excited to see where she goes. If she continues to grow at the pace that she did from day one to day two, she's going to be a force as a caster in NA.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect closing remark for Milwaukee. I wholeheartedly agree. And yeah, I think we may be able to move down to Belo Horizonte now, where we, again, I think we're in a little bit of a time machine where MeteorFallian had like his heyday in 2023, became
Mm-hmm.
known for Bastiodon. Zarddy, also not only one of the first champions, but one of the first double champions that we had on the Play Pokemon scene. A little bit of a quieter year last year, but now back in full force, I must say, because his path to victory, even though it was one of the smaller regionals, it was stacked. Like he had to
Mm-hmm.
take down Rajev not once but twice. If
Mm-hmm.
you're able to do that, well, you've probably just won Brazil, is what you did.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. Seeing Zarddy return to form is really nice. I know he shared a few updates on socials over the past couple of months, or maybe even longer than that. It's good to see that he's got the time to compete, and then he's able to dedicate more energy and effort to it. This is another like similar sentiment that I get from Hard Jeff. For him, an off season is not winning every single event, right? And he's told me before that maybe he took a step back, and now he's in full force, and seeing a third place finish at Worlds, followed up by a regional championship, followed up by a grand finalist slot here in Belo Horizonte, it really shows that he is putting in that effort. So the meta in Belo Horizonte, we kind of alluded to this. We can go through this real quick. A lot of Galarian Moltres here, way more than we saw in Milwaukee. You don't see as many Peck users. You definitely don't see FEAROW anywhere that I can see on this top cut. Um, Dark type seems to be very powerful, whether it's Galarian Moltres or the Guzzlord. We saw a lot of Guzzlord and Corviknight pairings. There is an uptick in Clodsire here, and I do think there's a lot of diversity in the ground types. For example, if you look at the top four, you have four different ground types. You've got Diggersby for Zarddy, Shadow Steelix for Harjeff, you've got Gastrodon for Junqui F, and then you've got Shadow Kanto Marowak for Aureo. And then in the top eight, you also have a Clodsire and a Shadow Quagsire. So there's a lot of versatility here. We did have Marto Galladay competing here in Belo Horizonte. He actually brought the Como O, which is a little surprising, a little spicy, but definitely a fun pick. And then Desync bringing whatever preposterous combination of Jellicent and Abomasnow and Shadow Talonflame to a regional 2026 is just, or 2026 season regional is just incredible. Was there anything that stood out to you? Because there's one note here that I want to make that actually ties into the Japanese tournament we're going to talk about pretty soon, but I don't know if you are seeing what I'm seeing.
I don't know whether I'm seeing the same thing, but I do see that out of the top three trainers, there are no repeat Pokemon. We have actually 18 uniques in the three top spots. And yeah, Junkie F, I think first regional ever, at least according to PvPoke. I don't know, not PvPoke, Dracovis. The two sites that I use. I don't
Yes.
know whether there was a name change or whether this is just somebody who really rose to the top really, really fast. Coming in third with a repeat on what Martijn and Adequins did in Frankfurt with the exact same team of six,
Oh,
and
it's
really just
true.
a really, really good team. Um, Whereas Rajev did lean on a couple of Pokemon that I personally really like. The Guzzlord Corviknight combination was one that I brought to Pittsburgh, and I have really fond memories of. But
Mhm.
also a little bit more aggressive players in the Shadow Annihilate or the Shadow Steelix on his team, both which are, I would say, not really spicy, but off meta. But yeah, he did make them work. And then obviously Zarddy with a bunch of standout picks, I would say. Like the two things that I wasn't surprised by were Galarian Moltres. I was more surprised that we didn't see that many Galarian Moltres in Milwaukee, actually.
Yes.
But I think there's just like a huge influence of Murkrow and then obviously the standout Fearow. Then obviously Zarddy with the Credilli because Credilli is the best Pokemon in the meta. Um, but then bringing back Diggersby as a hard punish to the still pretty common Corsola, um, bringing back Azumarill, so doubling up on bunnies. That is a thing that we did see a while ago, but not really this season. But yeah, Azumarill apparently still got it. I thought it fell out of the meta with the advent of Pokemon like Gastrodon, which just like tank the move so easily and farm through it even with just body slams, thanks to the body slam buff. Also, Credilli just outpacing, hitting for super effective. I feel like it's like slightly tougher times for Azu than they used to be, but
Hmm.
taking a championship in this season as well. I don't know whether it's the first or whether a previous event already had an Azu champion, but I remember feeling whelmed by it in Frankfurt. But it's coming back. It returned to glory as it always does.
Yeah.
Um, then Tinkaton, which appears to be almost like a LATAM exclusive. I
Hmm.
am not a Tinkaton believer, but
Same.
it did take the crown here. And then obviously like the big standout in Shadow Dusk Noir, we talked about it at length, and yeah, it did prevail. It did find a lot of targets on Rajav's team, if I'm being quite honest, especially if it's one of
Yes.
89 plus HP Shadow Dusk Noirs, because the only real answer on Rajav's team, as far as I can see, would be the Guzzlord. And if you get a little bit of a farm down with your Shadow Dusk Noir, then you would be able to hit that for super effective damage with a very powerful Shadow Dynamic Punch. So even that is far from the worst case scenario.
LATAM is becoming known for sharing teams. We see with 7-Eleven Gaming and with the GB Lindos, they tend to bring the same squads. What I notice here in this graphic is that Zarddy and LNDS Paulino Tad both brought the same team of six. But we also have the Lindos sharing teams in terms of the Guzzlord players too. Corlash, Gandok Z, and Steinar all ran the same Guzzlord team. Corlash was actually the only variant of the three because his Blastoise is running Ice Beam over Skull Bash. Interesting wrinkle there. But Harjeff chose to run Guzzlord, but made a few tweaks, made a few changes. So he went with Shadow Steelix over the Clodsire. I think that gives you better anti-flying coverage because you have the consistent Thunderfangs. He went Shadow Annihilate over the Florges that we actually saw on the other three GB Lindos teams, which is very interesting. And then he went Lapras versus Blastoise as his water type. So you got a same typing water obviously, but you're a bit better versus opposing fighters and opposing poison type. Say that 3 times real fast. And then he went with Galarian Corsola for its added bulk over the Shadow Dust Noir. So a few changes there for Harjeff, but I like that the players are sharing teams. ZZ. I feel like I don't know. I feel like in EU, you just have folks like Tea and Pizza who just run random stuff and don't share with anyone, and then just come to the tournament and just sweep it. So who knows?
I think that was half a copy pasta.
Half.
But yeah, I don't know. I think Europe just has so many players who not only value competitive success, but they also want to see their runs connected to like a signature Pokemon, which is
Yes.
not as tangible as just like purely running the good stuff. But I appreciate it. It does make for some very interesting compositions that rise to the top. Um, However, I feel as if with 18 unique species in the top three, we can't really complain about too much uniformity in LATAM either. And one thing that I personally find really interesting about the runner-up team of Rajev is just the choice of Steelix. That um, there's so many variations you can run if you run that Shadow Steelix. I feel as if like the default one used to be the crunching one. Then there's now the Psychic Fangs plus Breaking Swipe double debuff variation. But also, I have seen people in practice bringing out the good old Earthquake, the Quakening, paired with Psychic Fangs. Maybe a reaction to the advent of Cloudsire, where you want to at least hit it back for something. But yeah, certainly interesting how this one Pokemon apparently has 4 viable charge attacks, which may
Mm-hmm.
be a world record, if I may say so myself.
Yeah, I agree. So Harjeff Steelix was running Thunderfang, Psychic Fangs, and Breaking Swipe, which when you look at the rest of the matchups, you look at especially his grand finals matchup versus Zarddy, you see double fairies. It feels like, man, I really wish I had anything besides Breaking Swipe here because even the crunch is single resisted versus being double resisted as a dragon type move that Breaking Swipe is. So very, very tough in that situation. But we have the top cut. We'll have the top cut graphic on stream so you can look over all these teams. One final thing I wanted to point out before we move into grand finals is that DVS Daniel, with his team of Shadow Kanto Marowak, Shadow Scizor, Cradily, Galarian Moltres, Chargebug, and Galarian Corsola, this team to me really encapsulates where we started with this meta a few short weeks ago. And then if you look at the top 3 finishers in Zarddy, Harjeff, and Junqui, you see kind of the evolution and the changes in the meta. So the meta in Pokemon Go is always a moving target. I don't know if it's as if it varies as much or if it's as volatile in VG or TCG. I definitely think not TCG, but that's besides the point. the point is that these teams are always a moving target, and if you're not constantly up to date with practice tournament results, scrimming, looking at the tournament streams themselves, it can be very easy to feel left behind in terms of how the meta shifts and changes. So yeah, ZZ, we still need to work on our meta guide at some point. We'll get that done eventually. But yeah,
I also want to mention that um, we say, oh, meta moved from A to B, now it's at B. I think the presence of all of these teams in high placements kind of goes to show that so many viable options coexist currently, and they don't push each other out of the meta as much. I feel like we have that phenomenon at times where we were earlier in agreement that Talonflame may not be as good anymore. It does feature on Junkie's team, so it may still have done something. But overall, I just feel as if we may have the most variety and also like the most options when team building. So there's a lot of self-expression that goes on in that team building phase where, oh, I have this Pokemon that I can play really well, that I really like, that I think is really useful. And you don't really like have to micro target this one meta team, but you can just choose from so many options that coexist without really overpowering each other. And I think that's a beautiful place to be within a meta. And I must say, I wasn't always this optimistic about this meta, so seeing this development manifest in that way is a very positive surprise to me.
yeah, I agree with you. I think long gone are the days of everyone running level 50 Metacham, level 50 Lickitung, level 50 Sableye, level 50 Azumarill, and just kind of brute forcing their way through mirror matches endlessly. I think those days are long behind us, and I'm so thankful for that because 2 or 3 years of commentating that got very boring, and I can't even imagine as a viewer passively tolerating that must have been just awful. So I agree with you. I think that the wealth of options is a great change for a meta, and I'm glad that we have it. I hope it remains that way. So I contacted Harjeff, and he was kind enough to share the teams from the grand finals. So we didn't get a stream in Belo Horizonte, unfortunately, but Harjeff always keeps a little notebook where he writes down the first 3 letters of each Pokemon's name, and then I can kind of see how the matchups must have gone, right? So the final record for the grand finals was 1 win for Harjeff and 3 wins for Zarddy in that order. So we're going to play a little guessing game here. Based on the team comps and what looks strong and what looks feasible here, let's make some predictions, right? So I've got the notes in front of me, but Z's Wireless does not. So let's see if he's going to make some of the same reads. ZZ, take whichever trainer you want or however you want to dissect this. What do you think the Pokemon and teams would be?
Okay, so I don't know whether I'll be able to construct all of the lines, but I do want to pick standout Pokemon for each trainer.
Let's do it.
So I think with Zarddy, maybe I'm just overestimating it because my eyes are drawn to the one standout pick that hasn't won before. But Shadow Dusknoir again, like you have so much pressure into the um, Annihilate. You have a better pacing than the Corviknight, which just needs to get to its payback to do meaningful damage. It doesn't really do much with its sand attacks at all. You don't have Crunch to fear from the Steelix, and with the right HP stat, you also have a pretty decent matchup against Galarian Corsola. Add onto that the dynamic punch coverage against both Lapras and Guzzlord. I do feel as if the Shadow Dusknoir may have come to more games than not on Zardy's side.
Yes.
Whereas for Rajev, I think it's like a little bit trickier just because you're really hard pressed to find something that is like strictly safe into Zardy. But if I was Rajev, I would probably try to lean on Lapras just because it's very maneuverable with the way the one turn fast attack of Psywave works. And even though um, matchups like Galarian Moltres or um, Cradily aren't strictly favorable, you do have Ice Beam to hit them for super effective damage. So just like as a big equalizer, as like a neutral pick, I could see Lapras coming out quite a bunch here.
All right. So I'll give you the rundown here. First, you mentioned Shadow Dust Noir. Zarddy did bring it to 3 out of the 4 games. And then Harjeff did lean on Lapras quite a bit. He brought it to 3 out of the 4 games as well. So
Okay.
yeah, I think you make a really good point. Shadow Dust Noir's ability to just close out games against Harjeff's team looks overwhelming. It almost feels like when you see that Dust Noir on the opposing side, you're forced into one of 3 things. 1, bringing Guzzlord, because that's like one of your best answers to it. 2, bringing Galarian Corsola and just hoping that you've got a shield advantage or some kind of HP advantage to win. Or 3, just leaving your Shadow Nihilape on the bench completely, because that matchup is abysmal for the Shadow Nihilape, especially when shields are up, of course. So a lot of pressure just from that one Pokemon placed here on Harjeff's team. I actually looked into the 2 shields here, and for Harjeff, the only Pokemon on his team that beats the majority of Zardy's team in the 2s is that Shadow Steelix. It's able to beat everything except the Diggersby in the 2s. But then you run into a situation where you've used all your resources on Steelix, and you have to deal with the insane closing power of Dynamic Punch, Shadow Dust Noir, Brave Bird, Galarian Moltres, or whatever you get from Tinkaton or Azumarill, etc. So very tough. And then if you're trying to play Guzzlord as Harjeff, you have 2 fairy types to worry about, plus Dynamic Punch, Dust Noir. So it's like, man, this is a really, really tricky matchup to be in. So I'll paint the picture for you in game number 1. Game number 1, Zarddy is on the winner side. Harjeff is coming from the loser side. Zarddy leads Shadow Dust Noir into Guzzlord. But here are the full teams, right? Zardy's got Shadow Dust Noir, Azumarill, and Galarian Moltres. Harjeff has Guzzlord, Galarian Corsola, and Lapras. So you have a Guzzlord that might see an Azumarill down the line. You've got a Galarian Corsola who gets farmed by Galarian Moltres. And you've got a Lapras that deals double resisted Psywaves to Galarian Moltres. And somehow, there's no stream, right? But somehow Harjeff won this game. I don't know how.
Holy.
I don't know how he did it, but he won that game number 1. So that was insane. I'll have this graphic up on the YouTube version as well, but if you're listening with the podcast, I'll just give you the verbal recap. Game 2, Zarddy leads Cradilly into Guzzlord. Full teams are Cradilly, Tinkaton, and Galarian Moltres. Harjeff has Guzzlord in the lead again, Shadow Steelix, and Lapras. So again, he's got a Lapras that's dealing double resisted Psywaves to the Galarian Moltres or single resisted Psywaves to the Tinkaton. And then he's got a Shadow Steelix, which I think Tinkaton handles that relatively well. But it's probably a pretty close matchup, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah, it's just like Steelix is always so weird because the charge attacks tend to do less than the fast attacks, but
yeah,
it's on the more awkward side for sure.
Then game 3, Zarddy leads Galarian Moltres into Lapras, which obviously is a very nice matchup when the shields are up, because you were double resisting again the Psywaves. He's got Shadow Dust Noir and Azumarill in the back. Meanwhile, Harjeff has Lapras, Galarian Corsola, and Corviknight as his third. And then after 2 wins in a row, I think Harjeff just kind of goes all in, and it backfires explosively, because in game number 4, Zarddy leads Shadow Dust Noir into Shadow Annihilate, the dreaded lead.
Oh no.
And also the guts of Zarddy to lead Shadow Dust Noir when he's seen Guzzlord lead 2 out of the 3 games that he just played. So kudos to him. Zarddy actually goes double fairy this time with Shadow Dust Noir, Azumarill, and Tinkaton. And unfortunately for Harjeff, not only does he have that Shadow Annihilate lead that we talked about, his second Pokemon is Guzzlord. And it's absolutely freaking useless in this matchup with 2 fairies and a Dynamic Punch user. And his third Pokemon is Shadow Steelix. So no Diggersby, no problem for Zarddy, as he doesn't even need it to beat Harjeff here in the grand finals. And honestly, looking back at that game number 1 and the team comps, I can't even imagine how Harjeff won that first game.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm just like thinking, I'm trying to visualize the very last game. Just like imagine being that Annihilate, you get sent out of your Pokeball, and you're up against a Shadow Dusknoir and 2 fairy types. Like
Exactly.
that is pain, is what that is.
Absolutely crippled. I had some notes from Harjeff here as well. He said, let me see here. Well, first he expressed the sentiment that he's happy to see Zarddy win, but he's definitely a hardcore competitor and he would like to take that trophy, which I totally understand. And then he's got one more note. I wanted to bring up. Oh, here it is. Uh, he says, one comment I was going to make that might be worth sharing is that I was counting and depending heavily on Zarddy to make mistakes, which is completely normal. And I think I've managed to win in other difficult matchups thanks to that. But he played very well and cleanly the whole time, pivoting his strategy and changing it from game to game. So he didn't give me any openings and made no mistakes. So if you needed any more clarification that Zarddy was back, I think having our LAIC champ, our third place world's finisher, multiple regional champion say that is the proof in the pudding.
Yeah, I really hope that I do want to see Zarddy compete internationally as well, partly because we don't really get streams for LATAM events all that much. So, yeah, I don't know. This may put him up there for the UIC Travel Award potentially. So, yeah, I would not be opposed to having some Brazilians invade my continent just because I'm a big fan of their gameplay.
Yeah, me too. I'd love to see Zarddy travel. I don't think he's come to a North American or European event
I
ever.
did meet him at 2022 Worlds in London, which is like
Ah,
obviously where you would travel to, but yeah, I
fair.
guess like most of the opportunities he takes are just within his home country.
Fantastic thing that I realized when looking at the simulations. Harjeff did not have Cradilly on his team. We've gone over that a couple times, but when you look at Cradilly versus Zardy's team, right? Just mental model this with me. If you look at Cradilly versus Zardy's team, Cradilly actually goes 5-1 in the one shield versus Zardy's team. Its only loss is Dustoir, and Dustoir has to bait a Shadow Punch and connect with Dynamic Punch. So if Zardy is playing Diggersby, Tinkaton, Cradilly, Glarimol, Trace, Azumarill, and Shadow Dustoir into the ubiquity that is Cradilly, how in the heck did he get to a grand finals without a single clean win across his entire team?
Well, my Pittsburgh team was also pretty much 6 times weak to Credillia, so I believe it is a Pokemon that you can build weak to, as long as you like have that roadmap in your mind on how to take it out precisely. Because while it is a very strong Pokemon and a very flexible Pokemon at that, it is not what we would call a sweeper. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
are 5 times weak to say a Shadow Scizor, you may just get destroyed by it. Whereas if you're soft to Credilly, it's like, I don't know, like with Azu back in the day, like you can always just gang up on it and eventually it will fall. So I don't mind that type of team building strategy as much.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I feel like with the 45-second switch timer and the high skill ceilings as well that you see at this level, you can't really rely on these hardline matchups. As Butters always says, there's fluidity in gameplay, and there's never or very rarely a static one-on-one full HP versus full HP, even switch timer, even shield scenario, right? So you can't rely on the Sims too much, but it's always funny to think about, like if you're team building and your top weakness is Cradilly and you're like, yep, this is the team I'm going to run. It just seems like a weird approach. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
something
like
else. God.
I think that's like another fun thing where Pokemon that just core break the Credilly plus Ghost core are almost viable just because of that. Because like you
Yeah.
know that those Pokemon will be around and mostly share like will be on the same team. So if you say like a King Gambit, for example, like
Oh
I
my
will not
God.
go into that craziness too deeply again, but when I brought that to Worlds, it did find its target. It's
It
like
did.
some Pokemon that are bad in the grand scheme of things can be made good by Credilli and Corsola just being everywhere, whereas Corsola and Credilli being everywhere doesn't really mean that everything that Soft loses to those would and would be out of consideration immediately, just because of the nature of those slow, like they slow down the play in a way because they're a
Mm.
little like Credilli takes 14 turns to its first move. Corsola takes 15 turns to its first move. It's not really that dangerous or difficult to maneuver around if you have like a little bit of more aggressive picks. Like for example, a Shadow Dusknoir, which is perfectly fine into each of these Pokemon.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the. I think that explains very well the trap that some players fall into, where they feel like, oh, Cradili's everywhere, so I have to play Shadow Scizor. Cradili's everywhere, so I have to play Fortress because I need that hard answer. And I feel like if you slot yourself too deeply into that, you kind of get stuck. You kind of get pigeonholed into thinking you have to run certain Pokemon. When if you play more neutrally and, like you said, dance around the matchups, use the switch timer, and you don't get overwhelmed, then you can find your way through. So that's definitely a very important topic of skill expression that I appreciate. One of my favorite things, ZZ, is I like to take these championship teams. I like to plug them into PvPoke, and then when I cast an event, I like to say, oh, well, my pick for this tournament is X or Y or Z because I looked at the teams and this Pokemon came up as one of the top core breakers. Something I wanted to
Oh,
mention to
smart.
you. Yeah, five head, that's what they pay me the big bucks for. So something I wanted to mention to you is that I broke down Harjeff, MeteorFallian, Pranav, and Zarddy's teams. And one of the top core breakers for Harjeff, Meteor, and Pranav's teams across all three is Primeape. And I think Primeape might have some play going into this next tournament in Lille. We'll have to see. Other Pokemon like Empoleon show up, Dedenne shows up. Galarian Corsola, surprisingly, is on the list 3 out of 4 times as well, which means Galarian Corsola is not going anywhere anytime soon. But maybe some Primeape action, and I thought you'd appreciate that. So,
I'm, so one thing that I was kind of wondering, I don't know whether we do like little predictions, but I know that last year's Lille was the Malamar show, and
yes.
with Fortress being mostly seen in North America, at least so far, we've only had one European event, but it's not really been much of a thing here. Um, and again, we talk about core breakers to Cradily and Corsola a lot. We maybe want something that puts out fighting type damage like a Primate, but we also don't want it to suffer too much against pack users like FEAROW. Maybe we could
Hmm.
like see a little repeat from last year for Lille. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's just like a thought that I had. I don't know who will put it into action. I also am still a big believer in Shadow 2 cannons, so maybe take my words with a grain of salt. Um, but yeah, that was like a thing where I was like, okay, you have like a ghost, you have utility for superpower, like for fighting type damage. Like, what is good
Yeah.
against ghosts? What has fighting type damage? And then you would arrive at Malamar, maybe. Also because
Hmm.
Florges was tipped to be a big breakout star, but hasn't really. I don't think it medaled just yet. Um,
Well,
so
that actually segues perfectly into what I wanted to talk to you about. We already recapped the grand finals. Congratulations to Zarddy and Harjeff. I feel like we've exhausted our Belo Horizonte recap. But the one thing that I saw that I was hoping you would see was the Florges. We saw Florges on 3 of the GB Lindos teams, it being Corlash, Gandox, and Steinar. We saw it a couple other places as well. And if you look back to Milwaukee, BJ Pawat also had Florges on his team. So we were recently made aware of a cup called the Kokoperi Cup. I think this was the second iteration. It was a cup with very talented Japanese trainers that you probably recognize, like Nyan Kake, Kip 20139, Luminous, as well as Pokimichi and Pokemoneymaker and Katunari. So very, very talented top trainers that we see either top cutting or winning the PJCS every single season. This was a fantastic graphic to look at. And what I noted was that Florges was actually at 20% usage, which is 1 out of 5. And it was actually on the winning team from Chana P 715137 and made a couple of appearances, actually 3 appearances in the top cut. So you don't sound like you're a Florges believer, Swilus. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't say that I'm a big Florges believer, but I think it has utility. So Florges is a Pokemon that, again, when I talk about Pokemon that are easy to play around because they can't really sweep you, I think Florges does fall into that category.
Mm-hmm.
But between Trailblaze and Chilling Water, you have so much good coverage, you have so much ability to either boost your own attack or to lower the attack of your opponent. And I think if you utilize Florges and like set up the rest of your teammates by using the Florges as like a little bit of a debuff, soft losing type of Pokemon, then there is a good chance that Florges will medal in the TPCI regions as well, and not just in Japanese grassroots. So I think like it can be made work. It has been made work in practice tournaments. It's just a fairly delicate Pokemon because you mentioned
Mhm.
earlier that your personal cutoff for what makes a bulky Pokemon and what should make up like 5 out of 6 slots on each team is probably like around the 2000 stat product range, whereas a high rank Florges comes in like slightly below a 1900, I would say. So it's comparable to a Sableye in that regard. Um, Therefore, not necessarily the squishiest Pokemon around, especially not with the chilling water artificial bulk, but it's a little higher maintenance than some of the reliable picks that you can just slap on every team, and it may require a little bit of finesse. But a well played Florges is certainly a real Pokemon. Like, you don't have to be declared crazy just for bringing up Florges. I think that's a perfectly viable choice, and I'm pretty sure that in Lille we are going to see at least one Florges in Top Cut as well. I think it's
Mm.
still, I think because it's so unexplored, it will immediately appeal to Europeans too, just so they can be the first to make it work. Um, so yeah, I think Florges, even though it hasn't really risen to greatness just yet. I
Mhm.
don't believe it's dead in the water either. I think it did make its top cuts. It did show some promise. It may just need a little tweaks in terms of the supporting cast and maybe a little like we've been like it's 2 weeks between Milwaukee, Belo Horizonte, and Lille, so that's 2 weeks of figuring out the Pokemon a little more. And yeah, I believe there's more good Florges runs to come.
Well, I will say it's annoying as hell in Go Battle League. I hate playing against that Pokemon because if you don't have a strict answer, it can be very spammy and very annoying. 10 turns to the chilling water is super cringe. It's a much more annoying than I think a lot of people are willing to say. But this top cut graphic is so interesting. I was trying to find the bracket for it earlier, but I didn't see it. My Japanese is not very good, admittedly, but I will say that we had some fascinating picks. Right. And we always look at Japan as being like a wild card at Worlds every year because we don't really get to talk about what they play. So when we do get a tournament like this, I feel like we got to talk about it at least a little bit. So
100%.
Nyan Kake in third place with Meowscarada, which has made a couple waves here and there, and seeing it finish in bronze, so to speak, in this tournament is definitely surprising. Again, we saw multiple Florges, but I want to talk about GG's 489 Hiro Maru's team. What in the world is going on with this?
I think they're doing this on purpose. Like there's no way you organically arrive at a point in your life where you think Shadow Salamence is what is going to lead you to victory in the Open Grade League. And I'm the two cannon guy, okay? If I say that, it means something. Um,
Yeah, it was good in Fantasy Cup. I really liked Shadow Salamence there, but
yeah, with Fire Fang, right? But I don't believe we have the actual moveset data for this tournament. I believe it's probably on Dragon Tail. That's what I'm thinking. And you do have the nice pacing now with Dragon Tail actually only taking nine
to Brutal
turns
Swing. Mhm.
to get to the brutal swing, which is nice coverage, especially against those ghost types Pokemon. But like, don't quote me on this, but I would almost be surprised if like a Galarian Corsola wouldn't just farm this thing down in the twos because it
Yeah,
is very much made of glass. And yeah, interesting resistance profile, good pacing, but non-stab brutal swings. Is that really what we're going for here? I really appreciate them for running this Pokemon. Like, do not get
yeah.
me wrong, I'm a big fan of goofy stuff like that having some success, but I do not know how replicable that strategy is.
Yeah, what makes it even more preposterous is that as you look at the rest of the team, and we'll have the graphic up on screen for you, but as you look at the rest of it, he not only has a Shadow Salamence, he also has a Shadow Charizard on the team. So two frail flying type Pokemon that are going to get crushed by something like a Bastiodon, uh, coexisting in the same ecosystem. They used to say this town wasn't big enough for the two of us, but I think Charizard and Salamence just disagree because having one of these would be preposterous, but having both is diabolical.
I will say that generally, like these two Pokemon do share the weaknesses of their flying typing, which makes them like not the ideal core to run. But it wouldn't be the first time a flying fire and a dragon type find success on the same team. I do believe that I think it was Tauntaun Matus who actually ran a combination of Shadow Charizard and Shadow Dragonair back in the day to
Correct.
win USC 2023 or like in the 2023 season at least. Yeah, that was in 2023. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that core is kind of proven. It has proven itself in the past. Just like again, like with Bastiodon just coming off a tournament victory, a little bit ambitious to run those two together for sure. But well, like if you get Shadow Salamence on a usage graphic, like fair play. That's almost as good, if not better, than first place.
Yeah, that's a flex. I think the only way this can be outdone, ZZ, is if you get Shadow Toucanon on a top graphic. All right, that's the only way.
Well, I'm not worried about the graphic as much. I'm just wondering, like, oh, can it medal? Can it win? I'm certain it can get top eight.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I just
He's
I
not
just,
believing me at all.
no, I'm just picturing you like going through your collection of spice picks and you're like, Shadow Salamence, poof, you throw it away and you pick out the Shadow Toucan, you're like, yeah, this one. This is the one.
It's very well ranked in
Huh?
like in terms of two cannons. It's like a high ranked shadow that I caught in Pittsburgh. It has flash cannon. You would like if I don't know, maybe I sent you the screenshot of me flash cannoning a Carbink in GBL and we can put it up
Oh,
on screen for the YouTube version.
okay.
Um this thing is it's incredible.
Okay.
It won multiple practice tournaments already for me. It swept them. Didn't even drop a game. I think I got three practice tournaments wins with it. It's good. It's real.
So
Trust the
that's
toucan.
you. That's you on the Candle Cult graphics. Is that what I'm looking at?
So actually, I did sweep one. I think it was yesterday even. Then there's one that should have been on this week's graphic, but it was omitted, which
Yeah.
was very sad. It was only a four rounder, but I did have
Ah.
Aqua Breed, Paldean Taurus, and King Gambit on that team as well. So that one I just entered because it would be funny if Martin had to put that on a graphic. But the week before this one, you will find one two cannon team. And there's one error with
Mm,
it because there's two ghost types on the graphic when it was one and a Clodsire. But two cannon certainly is on there. And I will say it comes to
okay.
more matches than it doesn't. Like it doesn't stay
Hmm.
on the bench a lot.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, I think I've doubted you in the past to my detriment, so I might come around on this one eventually. But we'll see. We'll see what the results in Gadans say. But that's besides the point. ZZ, I feel like we've covered Milwaukee, we covered Belo Horizonte, and we even talked about the Kokoperi Cup in Japan. I think there's kind of like some random miscellaneous things that we could touch base on and kind of discuss those. But we are approaching the end of the show. We just hit the 2 hour mark, so uh, yeah, where to start? How about with a humble brag and just say that the level 80 outfit was designed and inspired by Amanda and I from our Anaheim Worlds outfits? I mean, this is clearly the case, right?
Yeah, certainly the official Worlds casters don't get any insights as to what's to come for their game, and therefore will have their outfits picked out for them, right? Like that would be preposterous to even suggest. I'm pretty sure they just saw how amazing you guys looked while performing the Worlds broadcast, and they were like, okay, like maybe we do a Speediest Chief inspired legend pose, or do we do like an Amanda sticker? No, I haven't. I will just select their outfits as something that we can choose in game. And yeah, let's make it the level 80 rewards because those guys look so cool. It needs to be something truly special. I think that was the exact thinking process going into that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think you basically laid it all out there for everyone to see, and it was really funny because when these outfits dropped, I think Amanda made a post about it, and she got over 1,000 likes on her post. I mean, for
It
Pokemon Go Twitter, it blew
did
up.
go viral, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely blew up. There's this really cool picture of Amanda and I standing in the hotel lobby after Worlds, wearing our outfits. I remember her friend asked us to turn on the jackets just so she could take a picture, and I'm so glad we did because that's such a funny picture. We're going back to back, and yeah, it was really funny because I had this idea to do the neon suits months ago. I mean, months before Worlds, so like in May or something like that, and I was inspired partially by another game I really love playing these days called The Finals, where there's like a neon cowboy outfit. And I thought, man, if we could put this into our world's fits, we'd be the only people to do it. It'd be the most unique thing that we could possibly do. And it would be freaking sick. Because, I mean, people would ask questions like, oh my God, how did you get the lights in your suit? Are you catching on fire? Is it hot? Does it burn? You know, we get all those questions. And we definitely did get all those questions and more. But yeah, seeing the outfits was so funny. One of the lead designers on Pokemon Go actually did reply to the post because somebody asked him if the suits were designed after Amanda and I. And he replied and said, no, it's just a happy coincidence. We've had these in the pipeline for a few months. And I can clarify, I won't reveal my sources, but I can clarify to all of you that I did see some internal messages with Niantic. And when Amanda and I went on screen and our suits were lighting up, a lot of folks in the design team lost their minds, and there was a lot of chatter back and forth. And they were like, "What the hell? Like, did somebody tell them? Like, is there a leak? Like, what's going on? This is
I
insane."
love that this
Because
is genuinely just a coincidence because I
yeah,
was convinced it wasn't.
yeah, me too for a while. But I mean, I had no idea this level 80 outfit was coming. I truly did not. It's just again when you see the genesis of this idea and how it came about, I think you'll start to believe me. And also, yeah, I got confirmation directly from Niantic that they had put this in the pipeline a few months ago, which makes sense because these things normally take a long time. But it's just such a funny coincidence. Yeah, Niantic and I are on the same page, and I'm so thankful as well. Shout out to Amanda for trusting me because I think any other co-caster, if I would have told her, yeah, so at the biggest tournament of the year, I'm going to do this super experimental thing that no one's ever done. And I think it's going to work, but I have to repeatedly order and return lights from Amazon. I think I honestly use why I returned like 5 different sets of lights because they weren't what I needed, and then I have to hand sew them into the suits. And then hopefully, when we plug in our battery packs, they don't overheat and catch our suits on fire or melt or anything like that. And we're just going to see how it goes. And she trusted in me, and it turned out really, really well. So we might bring him back. We might bring him back. All right. So if you like the streams,
Yeah,
keep an
like
eye on
greatly
that.
looking forward to that.
Keep an eye on that. Speaking of watching the streams, enough about me. We've got another caster debut. The Leo casters were just announced a few minutes before we started recording, and Jay the Underdog is going to be casting in Leo. Immediate reactions, Vilas. I'll hand it over to you.
I think Jay is a great choice, even though he's not a choice that I would have initially thought would be like even interested or on their radar. Because even though Jay is a PvP community mainstay and streamer who had a very impressive journey from being more of a PvE person, getting into the game mode, and then slowly improving over time, he hasn't really ever like he didn't ever really strike me as somebody who was like um just like a big play Pokemon nerd the same way you and I would be. And like I feel as if a lot of the um recruited casters, like
Mm-hmm.
it's not all of them, but plenty of them were in part recruited because people know them from the competitors side already, or know them from like big PvP YouTube levels of content creation. Whereas um I bet there was likely an application process where um Jay was selected, and I personally think that's going to be such a great choice because this guy, um, while not really having been around play Pokemon as much as others, in terms of the way he makes Pokemon Go an enjoyable experience on his streams,
Mm-hmm.
there's few people that I would much rather see on the big screen than him. Like Jay is always such a good time. He's like a theater kid in the best way, I would say, and very personable. I think he will elevate the experience for the people around him as well. And yeah, I'm like a little curious as to what to expect, but I am expecting a really good initial showing, and hopefully looking forward to see him on more casts because he's always somebody that I just found super super likable. And
Hmm.
yeah, therefore hearing those news was something that made me personally quite happy, I must say.
I haven't watched too much of his content, but I do think you make a very, very good point that having different perspectives and not having everyone be so similar in terms of, the standards of what they're looking at, how they talk about matches, what their verbiage is. I think having new blood kind of added into the mix in terms of someone like Jay, I think is going to be really good because you're right. I have no idea what to expect. I don't know if this is going to be more like a watch party vibe cast or if this is going to be hyper technical. I kind of doubt it'll be the latter. I think the EU is known for being extremely technical with a lot of their casts. So Jay is kind of like an outlier in terms of what we usually expect from the EU scene. So I think that's going to be really good. Yeah, I'm really excited. I think everyone should watch the Lille broadcast. I know if you're hardcore enough to listen to this podcast, you probably are, but tell your friends to watch it. All right. We need to cast the net a little wider. We're also going to have Amanda Lundberg. I don't know who that is, but I heard she's okay. We have Inadequates returning to the casting booth. So he's kind of this revolving door of winning tournaments, casting events, winning tournaments, casting
Yeah, yeah,
events.
yeah. Now he doesn't have to do anything for the rest of the year anymore. Like he's
Yeah, job is
he's done
done.
with the season. Yep.
Exactly. And then
Uh,
I'm really excited to see our fourth caster, Arceus Aurelius or Marcus, right? Marcus to me is such an entertaining person. He's kind of that unique blend of entertainment but also analysis where he's so smart and he's so brilliant in terms of understanding the game, but he also can make a joke and crack you up and uh, have water splash on his head in a downtime segment for a stream and still be completely professional the next time the camera's on him, right? So I feel like he's got a lot of the right ingredients. I want to see him make a leap forward, kind of in terms of growth, in terms of presentation, kind of like what we saw Shira do. Just continue to grow into the caster role, and I think that he's got a great chance to do it. He's got two very experienced casters in Amanda and Martine. I'm not sure what the pairs are going to look like, but I assume we're going to get kind of one of the two experienced ones with one of the two relatively newer ones.
yeah. I like the point that you made, and that Marcus probably will develop as a caster pretty quickly because I think the only criticism that one could leverage against him is being a little rough around the edges at times, but he
Mm,
has everything when it comes to personality and everything when it comes to knowledge. And knowledge is very difficult to get the same way he has it already because he is a top competitor. And personality is just something that you can't even learn. So
true,
I feel
true.
like as if he has the two-thirds that are the most difficult to obtain already down to perfection. And now if he just smoothes out the casting a little bit when it just comes to like I don't know, just like being going from one point to another in the moment fluently and without a second thought in a way. I think that's just like something that happens naturally the more you cast. And yeah, the
Yeah.
more opportunities he gets, the more I think that will manifest as well. Yeah, I love the idea where he poured water on his head because he made that bet. That is also something that few people would dare. I'm still mad the broadcast cut out.
Yeah.
But yeah, just make another bet. Just do it again. We will not get tired of the bit.
This is a little bit off topic, but I kind of wonder if there's some kind of guideline around that in terms of in particular, like in terms of Japanese media. I wonder if you can show like water about to hit a person and then the after effect, but you can't show it actually in the process. I don't know. Maybe
Oh.
maybe I'm just talking, about nothing.
I,
But
I
I
think
feel
it
like
was
there's something
actually
there.
not being done on purpose, but
Okay, fair,
maybe,
fair.
maybe if they, I don't know, maybe if they broadcast broadcasted to Japan, they have to cut out the bit where the water hits him. But
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I'll ask an AI to tell me what's going on. But no, I'm just kidding. But speaking of good takes, right? Good casters, good broadcasts, good vibes all around. I saw a really painful take that I think we should just talk about briefly. I mean, this was like, I don't
I'm
know. This
always here for the painful takes.
Yeah, this okay. So on a on a um on a hard copium side, this felt like okay, maybe creators should work a bit harder to make more engaging content, right? That's maybe one way you could look at it if you're on some heavy cope. But if you're not coping that hard, this is just like basically just throwing crap at the wall to see what sticks and who you can piss off, right? So the take in question, I'll put it up on screen for us, is from WTM Go, who's a trainer that is active in EU. Let me see if I can get the link. Here we go. So I'm just going to read it. I'll put it again. I'll put the graphic up. Unpopular opinion: sharing teams in the form of videos and graphics is a lazy way of making content and only benefits the content creator themselves. The only way to make the game more dependent would be to play the game for them. I don't dispute that these types of videos could be nice casual viewing in quotes for some. I also think using usage stats from practice tournaments do not benefit players, but significantly condense the regional meta and negatively impact the viewer experience at Play Pokemon events for the average viewer. In combination, it creates a dependent player base that relies on being told what to play and how to play it. It limits the opportunity for creativity, except occasional breakthroughs. It creates a stale viewing experience for most spectators, and it makes it harder to break through as a grassroots player, despite the fact that both sharing teams and usage stats should help newer players. There's so much like there's so much cringe in this post. I don't even know where to start. CC.
I feel like he started somewhere and then just reached for conclusions that just didn't follow from the initial point that was being made. Because
Yeah.
when I just look at it, when I read sharing teams, videos, graphics is a lazy way of making content. Up until this point, I don't necessarily know whether I would disagree because very easy. It's very easily done, right? Like you come up with some basic team ideas before even playing the cup, or you ask other notable players to come up with team ideas. And that is like, it's not too much effort, right? Like, you don't need to record something crazy fancy. You don't need to do a lot of research as much. Like, you can do some basic research to find out about, like, oh, which teams, which cores would be good. But it is routine, I would say. Calling it lazy, that is already kind of making a value judgment. And I wouldn't make that value judgment as much because I don't think there's anything bad about these types of content, right? And I do think that they are actually helpful as a guideline, as an orientation, not only for newer players, but also for players that have been around for a couple of years, but may have things going on in their lives and will not be able to take those 30 minutes as easily out of their day to go on PvPoke and see what works, or may not have the insights that some of these more dedicated top competitors have. So I personally don't really believe there's anything wrong with putting that content out there. I do think there could be a conversation to be had about, should we have content creators that just go out there and like tell stories, react to current events, just be like a little personable with their community. Occasionally, you don't even have to make like a big moving slideshow with graphics and animations and like 13 editors working on that video. You could just like sit in front of a camera and talk about a thing that moved you or that interests you. And if you are an engaging personality or somebody who has something to say about a topic, I think that could work within the framework of Pokemon Go. And we don't really have that as much currently in the
Mhm.
PvP sphere. I didn't watch but stumbled upon like a Pokedaxi video the other day. We just drove out to a field and yapped for 45 minutes.
Mhm.
And there was like not a ton of effort going into setting that up either, but it is something where a person kind of goes out of their way to do something that feels a little more extraordinary than just going over a blog post that was just posted by Pokemon Go. And
Mhm.
I feel as if creators could become personalities more, in that they don't really need to just stick to GBL rotations and PV Poke rankings when they make their content. So if I was to leverage
Mm.
criticism against Pokemon Go content creation, that would probably be mine. Everything else that was mentioned afterwards, I disagree to strongly disagree with, like, to a point where I think it's like kind of silly almost. Like, how does it make it harder as a grassroots player to break through if people share, like, how do you make that leap of logic that that makes it difficult for a grassroots player to
Mhm.
perform well if people share their teams at times, especially because it's just suggestions as to what people could use. You don't have to use it, you could choose to counter it. You could also look at, oh, there's currently like 60 plus viable Great League options. Just
Yeah.
try out what you like and come up with a formula that you enjoy, because there is just currently so much creative freedom that you could benefit from. Plus, I do not see the connection between putting out those resources and, like, I don't know, like, tournament viewing getting stale because everybody is just like copying what was being used in practice tournaments. I
Mhm.
think we just made the perfect case to the contrary by talking about Belo Horizonte having 18 different species in the top three teams. Plus, when you talked about how you plug in the top teams from previous regionals into PvPoke to then reverse engineer what core breakers could arise for the next tournament. That's just
Mhm.
your caster predictions, but everybody is free to do that off the basis of previous competitive teams, but also
Yep.
off the basis of something like the Canonical Practice Tournament graphics, where you can look at the top 10, decide for yourself what is good into that top 10, and come up with a core breaker of yourself that you may not have been aware of otherwise, because if you took away that resource, all you'd be left with is essentially just the PvPoke rankings. And those are not really show six focused. Those don't include two shield scenarios. Um, there
Mhm.
still needs to be like a lot of work put in to refine that information. So yeah, I think having those graphics out, having that content out there is great. I still believe there are steps to be taken for Pokemon Go content to develop over the years. And I would encourage creators to do something that may seem out of the ordinary, out of the box, a little crazier compared to what you usually do more often, because I always enjoyed that content the most. We just talked about Arceus Aurelius as like somebody who has the personality and the knowledge of a potential top caster. And
Yep.
he put out YouTube videos for like a short amount of time, like a year and a half ago. And I loved those because he made
Me
like,
too.
oh, who's like the top 10 favorites going into Worlds? Why is this Pokemon good? And this is very far removed from just, oh, Pokemon Go Battle League rotates every week. This is the
Yeah.
new selection of top teams, which I think is like the bread and butter of content creation. Don't get me wrong, this is useful to so many people, but it's not really interesting
Yeah.
for experienced players. And I want to be like, if you want to entertain me, do something like Marcus did back then. But also, that doesn't mean that you need to stop doing everything else, because I don't think there's any negative impact to that.
No, you nailed it. I think we're in alignment that the second half of this post is particularly egregious. Uh, just this point about not wanting to see usage trends before going to a play Pokemon event. That's like applying for a job and not reading about the job responsibilities. Like they try to hand you the sheet that says, "Oh, you need communication skills and marketing and this email platform or whatever else," and you're like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm just going to go in and see what I can do with what I know." That just feels like a very unprepared way to go into it. I mean, just not even wanting to see what other people are thinking before you jump in. That's like, so there's envisioning creativity, and then there's like the far end of the spectrum where you just go in absolutely blind and you're playing Shadow Swana and whatever else, and you think that that is going to be the winner because that's what's worked well for you in your own Go Battle League matches. Would we get more variety in tournaments if that happened? Yes, but to your point about Belo Horizonte, when you've got 18 unique in the top three, I think we've already got a hell of a lot of variety. To the first point about videos and graphics in terms of teams, I know they can get a bit boring. We get a lot of that for, I think every creator almost publishes some form of like suggested teams for Fantasy Cup, suggested teams for Jungle Cup or Great League or whatever. But as a creator myself who's posted some of those team graphics, you do one of two things. Either one, you spend much more time than you would like on PvPoke trying to figure out a meta, trying to look at core breakers, trying to assemble teams, and you make a graphic with maybe 3 to 6 useful teams yourself, and it ends up taking probably 2 hours or more of research, and then you have to also make the graphic yourself, which if you don't have a template can take quite a while to piece all the different layers together. And the worst part about that is that if your teams suck, people will see that and they'll stop interacting with your stuff and they'll start ignoring your opinions, right? If you've got bad teams. So there's a downside to that. The other way you can do it is what Martine does, where you might ask other players or competitors or creators to source teams. But what are you doing then? You just opened up your project to chasing down 6 individual people with different schedules, different time zones, might get back to you immediately, might never get back to you if you ask them for a team. And then you have to cobble all those teams together into a graphic and push it out on a deadline. And if you're a creative or even just a introverted worker, that can be really tough to kind of track down people, have the emotional bandwidth to remember, oh, the deadline for this graphic, I promised my Discord and my following is 2 p.m. today, and I've not heard back from one of the players that's supposed to submit a team. It's not easy, right? And to the casual point about team graphics, after Sylph Worlds years ago, I coached for about 6 months, and it was so eye-opening for me because I started a program during the summer where I had like 12 people that answered it. We were doing like a really hardcore kind of boot camp style coaching program that lasted, I think, 4 weeks or something. And what I learned is that I would teach my students about turn cycles, about charge moves, about, you know, reading your opponent's back line, about all these different nuances. I had like a document called the 8 Pillars of PvP where I spelled out everything explicitly, very, very succinct. And what I found was that only 2 of my 12 students in that boot camp actually really cared about the fundamentals. And the other ones would absorb it. They'd learn a little bit about it. They say, okay, I understand. Oh, this is insightful. I'll use this. But after the first 2 weeks, they all started asking me for the same thing. They said, give me a good team and tell me how to run it. And that was it. And that was it. Like, no matter how much you try to preach the fundamentals, I only had one student who actually took the fundamentals and then started building his own teams and actually dominated pretty well on the leaderboards, page 1 GBL leaderboards consistently. Only one. And that was like pretty unique, right? Um, People need team suggestions. I find myself going through and looking for this because with other things going on in life, I'm not on PvPoke multiple hours per day. I'm not watching 5 different streamers every day to figure out what teams they're running. I like looking for team suggestions, and I do find myself doing that. And if there's something I think looks interesting, I'll give it a try, and then maybe I tweak it after that. But I think your point is so important. To call it lazy, I think is a bit of a stretch. I think it is necessary, and maybe it is overdone. But to call it like lazy or to kind of degrade the effort that goes into it, I think is a stretch too far. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the more I read this post, I kind of think it was just created just to annoy people, because these takes are like pretty far on the other side of the spectrum. And
There's
yeah,
there's one more take that came like a day after that was made on like broadcast viewership, and that was
ah,
it was written down in a very similar fashion, I would say. So
yeah,
there's certainly, I don't know, like provocation doesn't need to be a negative, but it also doesn't really need to be engaged with assuming that provocation wasn't the goal of it. Like we
exactly,
know what you're doing. I think it's worth engaging with the points made on their merits, but it's also okay to reject some of it if you think that applies here. And yeah,
yeah,
I personally believe that even though the point that one could aspire to um, certain forms of content creation that maybe haven't been represented within the Pokemon Go PvP sphere as much yet, that does not overlap with existing forms of content that help probably hundreds of players each meta rotation.
The best form of rage bait, it pokes at some kind of emotional insecurity, right? I think that Go creators have seen that GBL videos have largely not changed since the format came out. They're pretty much the same. Here's a good team, here's a 5-0, here's how you play it, GG's, right? That's it. I think that there is an underlying insecurity that there hasn't been more evolution in that term, in that sense of the content. And when you have players like, or creators like PvP Steve, who are actually going above and beyond with his graphics and his storytelling, I think it does help to inject some new inspiration into the model. But his viewership is much, much lower than the typical standard that you expect from the GBL
Yeah.
videos. So it's kind of a tough thing. In terms of viewership, okay, let's be honest, right? The Go viewership compared to VG is not anywhere close, right? You get the VG VODs from regionals, they've got 126,000, 150,000 views on day one of Milwaukee or whatever regional it might be. And then Go is like, maybe a quarter or a fifth of that viewership. I do think there is like, when you're right next to those other titles, there is a sense of competitiveness and there is a sense of comparison when you look at the viewership and you look at the audience. So I do think a lot of Go players are insecure about that. And I do think a lot of us have thought, oh, well, maybe our game is not growing, or maybe it's not growing at the rate that it should. And yeah, again, the best rage bait does have like a grain of truth to it. And I think that's what really hooks people and makes them feel emotional enough to respond. And I do think that maybe WTM is doing that. Also, go follow them. WTM Go PvP on X, formerly known as Twitter. We talked about their post long enough. We should at least send maybe a few followers their way. So might as well.
I agree.
But ZZ, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. I think we've pretty much exhausted all of our topics for today.
It's been 2 hours 30 minutes. I don't know whether whether this is a record for us, but it's already difficult for me to speak a straight sentence. So I guess we're pretty much at the end of it, and we'll hear back from another in just about a week from now when we do have a Lille Regional Champion crown. One more thing. There have been more regional locations announced, which is interesting, especially for our North American listenership, but also for our Australians, because I do believe that we have Houston, Texas, March 20th to 22nd, Orlando, April 3rd to April 5th, as well as Melbourne, late May 23rd and 24th. So 3 more guaranteed locations where you can earn those championship points. And yeah, I've heard people pretty excited about Houston. I guess like the Texan ones are always pretty well attended.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah.
That
Well,
would probably be it in terms of housekeeping.
the Houston tournament is my birthday weekend, so definitely very excited for that. I will be in Houston no matter what, everyone. So as a competitor, maybe you'll have to see, but yeah, I'll be there no matter what. I've got family that lives there as well, so I'm gonna make a trip out of it. But I'm very excited for those regional locations. Orlando is always special to me because 2020, right before the world shut down, was when we had our mega tournament in Orlando. We had like 230 players or more sign up. Valarash ended up winning it with Icy Wind Cloister, which is such a throwback. But yeah, very, very special cities to me. And this continues to be a very special season and a special year. So yeah, we're going to do a recap after the next regional championship. But I agree, ZZ, it's been quite a long show. We won't talk about the last meme that we wanted to share. I'll just throw it up on screen as the outro music plays, so you can all have a nice laugh. But it's been an honor and a pleasure, per usual. Even when we take time off, it feels like we are able to hit the ground running every time. Love doing the show. Love talking with you every time we get the chance. But ZZ, it's been an honor, and yeah, we'll see you after the next tournament for a recap. And that's all from us this week. Have a great rest of your day.
Same to you.